2%. The average in the Caribbean is about 5% of the bottom covered by live coral. The rest is covered by slime and seaweed. And most of the fish you can see are this big. And it is very, very rare that if you jump into any place in the Caribbean at random, you see a shark. It's very, very rare. Now, let's go to Millennium Atoll, for example. An atoll that is uninhabited and fished south of the equator in the Central Pacific, belongs to the Republic of Kiribati. 2009, we conducted the first underwater expedition to this island, and I still remember the first time. Jumped over the side of the boat, and as soon as the bubbles cleared, I was surrounded by 15 gray reef sharks. After a couple minutes, the sharks decided that we were boring, and they went back to do their thing. And you look down, 90% of the seafloor is covered by thriving coral, and it's full of fish, and a sea turtle comes by. Now, this abundance that we rarely see anywhere except in well-managed marine reserves. This is what the ocean used to be like, and this is what we have learned from going to these pristine places.
And you write in your book that you're writing the obituary of ocean life. What's the cure?
The cure is doing less harm. Basically, there are three things that we are doing to the ocean. One is we are taking fish out of the water faster than they can reproduce. Two, we are turning the ocean warmer and more acidic because of man-made climate change. And three, we are throwing in everything that we don't want, our waste and our plastic.
Okay, guys, as you can see, you probably understand. And now we place a stop on profit at 121.44. So if you trade this pair, euro against United States dollar, here we're supposed to place a stop on profit. Okay, I'll speak to you later, guys.
Huge economic opportunities through ecotourism. These areas that are managed by communities are very successful because the communities have a vested interest in having as many fish as possible inside them so they can enjoy the benefits.
What from the pandemic has changed your view when it comes to protection of the environment?
Nature has given us a very strong signal of how fast it can recover if we just give it space. Everybody was fascinated by all these videos of the whales and the dolphins coming into marinas and mountain lions on the streets of Santiago in Chile, wild goats in the UK. Nature has this extraordinary ability to bounce back if we just give it space. This is why we need to protect at least 30% of the planet by 2030.
How do healthy marine ecosystems help in the fight against climate change, though?
Most people see the ocean as a victim of climate change, but the ocean can also be a solution because we know that the more life that is in the ocean, like big fish and big whales, the more these organisms help to make the ocean productive and absorb more CO2. The kelp forest, seagrass beds, all of these are important ecosystems in the ocean that are similar to the forests on the land that capture a lot of our carbon pollutions.
What are you most excited about in your field?
We have 10 years to fix this problem. Global fisheries catch is going down, stocks are collapsing. Business as usual means that by 2050, 90% of the coral reefs are gone, that most commercial fisheries have collapsed. That affects food security, that affects migration of people. We have 10 years to get to peak greenhouse gas emissions and then go carbon neutral by 2050. And we have 10 years to protect at least 30% of the ocean so we can restore much of this health and productivity, not just for saving biodiversity, but also saving our life support system. We are not talking about something that is apart from us. We are not apart from nature. We are a part of nature. So these 10 years are probably the most critical in the history of humanity.
The most accurate measurements of changing oceans will come from space. While Enric Sala explores what lies beneath, a new satellite is giving us data from above.
We'll learn more about our oceans and climate change, but from space. A new satellite's been launched from California. Its mission, track the accelerating rise of sea levels.
Well, the main instruments on board include a dual-frequency radar altimeter. And this is the primary instrument of the mission, and that's the one that's measuring sea surface height, significant wave height, and wind speed over the ocean. And from those measurements, we can actually have the superb measurements that we expect of sea level rise.
Data gathered from Sentinel-6 will be used alongside information from other satellites to build as complete a picture of the oceans as possible.
With a long record, we can precisely measure the acceleration. We eventually can detect new regime, tipping points. For example, if there is a runaway in the melting of Greenland or Antarctica, sea level will record this runaway change because it is an integrator of all changes that are occurring in the climate system. So we will be able to see some change, big change in the global climate.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration expects that sea level rise will increasingly threaten U.S. coastlines. One example, the southern tip of Manhattan is expected to flood 20 to 40 times a year by 2030. 11
of the 15 largest megacities are located at the coast, and this number will double. The number of people living in coastal area will double by 2060. So, knowing how much sea level is rising at the coast and how much it will rise in the future in coastal areas is as obvious. It's obviously a major goal for human beings.
Coming up, from sails to steam to oil, the shipping industry is no stranger to change. But how will it navigate the next transition? This is Bloomberg Green. From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Anne-Marie Hordern. This is Bloomberg Green. Now, for your roundup of this week's latest climate news, Jennifer Zabazaja has your Green in Brief.
Here's the climate news you need to know. Deforestation of the world's largest rainforest has hit a 12-year high. More than 4,000 square miles of the Amazon rainforest was destroyed in 2020. That's a 9.5% increase from a year earlier. Government data shows that destruction has soared since President Jair Bolsonaro took office and weakened environmental enforcement. The Amazon is home to millions of species and plants and is critical in the fight against climate change. Bitcoin is hitting all-time highs, but at what cost to the environment? The cryptocurrency is energy intensive, and there are concerns if it becomes mainstream. According to MIT, back in 2018, Bitcoin's carbon footprint was almost as big as Portugal's. Want to get better at tackling climate change? We'll hire more women. That's according to Bloomberg New Energy Finance. Firms with 30% or more women in top jobs tend to perform better when it comes to the environment and are more likely to set clear climate goals. Shopping online is more popular than ever now, but the price of convenience is measured in CO2, and more deliveries means more fuel burned and more packaging wasted. So what can companies do? Well, many are becoming more efficient and sourcing more clean energy for their data centers and warehouses. And England's farmers will be paid to go green after Brexit. As European subsidies are phased out, they'll get new money to encourage them to produce healthy, sustainable food. Poor farming practices are one of the leading drivers of water pollution and the loss of biodiversity. I'm Jennifer Zabasaja in New York. Anne-Marie, back to you.
The shipping industry is more than just the grease on the wheels of globalization. It's its chief enabler. 11 billion tons of goods are transported by ship each year, the biggest contributors being 2 billion tons of oil, 1 billion tons of iron ore, and 350 million tons of grain. According to the International Chamber of Shipping, 80% of Europe's imports and exports happen over the seas. And for such a vast industry, it also contributes its fair share of emissions. Shipping makes up 12% of global transport energy consumption. So how does it clean up its act? Earlier, I caught up with Bloomberg Green reporter Laura Milan about just how big of a challenge this is going to be for the industry.
One of the main issues is size. So about 90% of the world's cargo is moved by ships. So obviously changing such a huge industry is not going to be fast and it's not going to be easy. The second issue has to do with technology. So ships obviously travel for many days at sea. It's not as easy for them to refuel as it would be for a car, for example, going on a road. And the sector still hasn't found a technology that's economically viable and that's zero emissions, an equivalent to the electric batteries for cars, for example.
But actions are being put in place to make the industry a bit more environmentally friendly. Walk us through those steps that they're taking.
That's it. So there's a first step that would involve using low emission fuels or biofuels that would significantly reduce the existing emissions. And then at a regulatory level, when it comes to the policy and the governments, there are steps being made as well. I would say that the most significant ones come from the European Union, which started to track emissions a few years ago and is now looking to include shipping emissions in the emissions trading system. So that would significantly reduce and help calculate the emissions from the shipping industry. Now, China is taking similar steps. So at the moment, regions need to report shipping emissions to the central government. And finally, we have the International Maritime Organization with a pledge to reduce shipping emissions by 50% in 2050. Now, we must say that that pledge has been considered insufficient by environmental groups, but at least some steps are being taken.
So to get to 2050, the industry obviously is going to need to start tapping some new technologies. What new technologies are you seeing being introduced into the shipping industry?
So we have seen pilot technologies being developed for years now, but what's interesting about this current moment is that we're seeing big players invest in these technologies that are not yet economically viable, but that one day might be. So for example, we are seeing earlier this year, the world's largest agricultural commodities trader, Cargill, saying they will invest in attaching sails to their ships so they can make any technology that they run their ships on more efficient. Similarly, we have seen a spin-off of Airbus, the aeronautics company, developing a similar application with kites. We have been following also developments in hydrogen. So at the moment, hydrogen fuel seems like a good option, a possible option when it has been developed and when it becomes economically viable. And we have Vestas, for example, the world's largest turbine maker, developing some ships that will be able to run on hydrogen in the near future.
Coming up, rising sea levels means humans need to get creative when it comes to coastal defenses. But how do we protect both ourselves and the environment? One Israeli startup may have the answer. That's coming up next. This is Bloomberg Green. London, I'm Anne-Marie Hordern. This is Bloomberg Green. After water, what's the resource that humans use the most? It's concrete, 3 tons a year for every person on the planet. And engineers estimate it's used twice as much as all other building materials combined. And it comes with a huge environmental cost. Concrete, not just in cities, it's a common feature on our coastlines too. And that's taking a toll on biodiversity. But one Israeli startup has found a way of making sea defenses stronger and encouraging life to thrive.
If you take a look at concrete structures like breakwaters or seawalls, the water around them is often clear. That's not actually a good thing, because it means there's no life. Marine species are actually most abundant in coastal areas, but it's also where us humans prefer to live too. So when we build here, we drive away marine life.
The concrete in the marine world has a lot of additives, a lot of chemicals, and some of those materials are actually leaching out, and they're actually prohibiting marine life to thrive. If we keep developing without any regards to natural communities, there is a tilting point from which beyond we cannot really go back.
In the coastal city of Tel Aviv, an Israeli startup wants to revolutionize our urban coastlines. Their sea defenses are transforming lifeless man-made structures into teeming ecosystems. They do this by replacing standard concrete with their own special cement formulas.
As opposed to regular cement-based concrete, e-concrete includes certain elements that enhance the growth of marine flora and fauna of plants and animals. Our admix, which is kind of our secret sauce, is basically kind of sealing the concrete, making it less aggressive for the marine environment. That once we add it, we enable life to flourish.
In the lab, the team run tests to identify what mixes will work best for marine life.
So we take really ice cube sized concrete slabs of different compositions, and we put larvae, 20, 30, 50. We need to have a lot of replicates. We're geeky scientists, so we have to have a lot of replication and controls. And then within a few days or just a few weeks, we can get an answer on their preference. So obviously, if they die, they have a very low tolerance to that specific concrete mix design. And if they thrive or they flourish, we can quantify that very quickly.
E-concrete says it typically sees double the biodiversity of regular grey concrete. From fish and sea caterpillars on their armour blocks to crabs on these tidal pools that sit on the shoreline.
This unit holds water during the low tide, so it's always moist, and therefore it has a very comfortable habitat for crabs and sea anemones and sea stars, etc. These pools have been here.
Okay, guys, position closed on euro. You should close it as well and collect your profit.
Next, E-concrete designs its products specifically to the marine environment it will be deployed, to create niches for endangered species or to develop nurseries like these oyster beds. The final part of the equation is creating complex surface textures to mimic natural rock or coral, an environment that helps anchor young organisms.
When concrete elements are being cast, the typical goal is to have a very slick surface, very, very smooth. The idea is to get the water to flow right across it. When we're designing e-concrete with a rough surface, we want to do the complete opposite. We want to slow the water when they are crossing the structure so that the larvae can actually adhere and attach to the surface.
E-concrete has to offer its clients more than just ecological credentials. Over time, they've discovered that creating hospitable habitats for marine life adds another advantage, one that is surely hard to ignore.
We've seen evidence to the fact that the growth of the organisms on the concrete create kind of a layer of defense. Just the addition of weight, we can actually gain stability and strength over time.
This is let's say the unit when we put it in the water. And this is after a year in the water. And what you can see here is all the oysters are completely covering it. We designed the units so they can withstand the forces and perform in terms of structural performance, but they can also be a backbone for ecological enhancement.
The company tests its miniature designs in tanks full of real seawater, rocks, plants, and animal life from around the world.
What we're looking for is the accumulation of calcium carbonate on the surface of the concrete of different mixes and different designs. This is the process that we call biogenic buildup. So with time, we get a buildup of calcium carbonate that is sourced from marine organisms on the surface of the concrete. And we actually encapsulate the concrete with a natural rock. So when the organism die, in the case of a coral, it will die, and then another coral will sit on it, and that's how a reef is growing.
The hope that our man-made structures could become stronger over time also means better economics. The units require less maintenance and could therefore stay in the water for longer. E-concrete, though, is just a few years old, so it needs more time to really quantify the longevity of its products. But the company are certain their products are better for the environment, and not just in terms of improving biodiversity.
We're kind of trying to offset some of that immense carbon footprint of the concrete industry.
Construction is responsible for about 11% of global carbon emissions. By adding a biological crust to their products, e-concrete prevents some CO2 from being released into the atmosphere.
For every kilogram of calcium carbonate being created by those marine organisms, we're offsetting 120 grams of CO2. So think about building a port infrastructure or a city waterfront that is an active carbon sink. I think that's a great advantage of the technology.
That does it for this week, but let's keep the conversation going on Twitter. Follow us at Climate. I'm Anne-Marie Hordern, and this is Bloomberg Green.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens.
Along with Tim Stanovic and Seesaw, kind of courtesy of the Fed.
Yeah, a little different than yesterday, Carol.
Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting to see how we've seen pullbacks and then investors come back into the market. Following with the Fed, I think we're all trying to figure out, do we need to be worried about inflation? Is growth going to come back so strong? What does it mean? I mean, growth, we're looking for growth right after the last year.
Value versus growth debate continues.
We're going to talk about that over the next few hours. We've got a great lineup. Let's get you going, though, on this Wednesday with the check on the trading day. Here is Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much, and happy Wednesday to you both. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all advancing. We've got a rally underway on Wall Street today, right to the numbers. We'll give you more on the why in just a moment. S&P up 44 now, up by 1.15%, just about the best level of the day. The Dow's up 460, rallying 1.5%. NASDAQ up 101 now, up by 0.8%. The NASDAQ 100 index up by 0.5%. 10-year yield 1.38%. The 10-year's down 13.30 seconds. Gold pulling back by $8 the ounce to $17.97, a drop there of 0.5%. And crude West Texas Intermediate at $63.29 a barrel. WTI up right now by just about 2.6%. Among today's stock standouts, travel stocks, specifically the airlines, UAL surging 8.3%. American Airlines Group up by 5%. Delta is up 2%. Southwest up by 4%. Recapping, stocks rally. S&P up 1.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you, Charlie Pellet. Bloomberg Business Week is brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with the solutions they need to grow a thriving business. Commonwealth, go where you grow. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more.
And now it's time for the Market Drivers Report. And with that is Dave Wilson, stocks editor at Bloomberg News, on the remote access from New Jersey. So, Dave, interesting trading pattern again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, starting out with losses and then sort of steadily rising as the day has gone on, pretty much anyway. We're near the highs of the day in the S&P 500. You're now looking at 10 of the 11 main industry groups in the index higher. Utilities a lone exception. Not exactly a surprise given what's happened to interest rates with above 1.4%. So, you know, put it all together, it makes sense. And then beyond that, I mean, you look at the best performers on the day, you're really talking about, you know, the more cyclical areas of the market, the ones most dependent on the economy. Energy stocks leading the way among the 11 main industry groups, and industrial companies, financial companies, raw material producers. You know, we're going to be talking about those groups again next hour with my chart of the day, so consider that sort of a preview. In any case, I mean, there is clearly a fair amount of confidence in where the economy is headed, and it was not like anything that we've heard yesterday or today from the Fed Chairman Jay Powell really shook that.
Dave, got a secret for you. Like, growth is a good thing. Like, the economy coming back, it's a good thing.
And here's the thing. If you've got growth over a broader portion of the economy, you don't need to focus so much on the fastest growing stocks.
But it doesn't mean they're also going to come undone either. Just listen, I'm not going to make the bullish case. I'm not going to be like, let's, you know, pump them up even higher. They've had tremendous runs, but it also just means maybe the market, as you say, broadens out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, I'm looking at what you would call big tech, you know, the companies with the $1 trillion market values and whatnot. And they're all trailing the S&P 500 except for Tesla, which is sort of in a world of its own at this point. You know, having taken the hit it did in the past few days, it's up 3.9%. But everything else is not keeping pace with the S&P 500 as we speak.
So, Dave, we've had, you know, close to 24 hours after yesterday's market close to kind of take a step back and make sense of what happened. The NASDAQ at one point down 3.9%. How do you make sense of what happened yesterday, especially in the context of what you're seeing with today's trade?
Well, you know, you fall back onto what you saw in the last couple of years at different points and the concept of buying the dip. I mean, bear in mind, you know, we've seen the S&P 500 setting records over time, and, you know, we're getting closer to doing that again today. I mean, we may not get there, it may take a while, but, I mean, that's the thinking. And with that in mind, it was almost like what you saw early yesterday gave some traders and investors, at least, an opportunity to kind of jump in here. I mean, I know you were talking to ARK Investments' Kathy Wood yesterday about buying Tesla. Shares were down. She took the opportunity. You could argue that's happening over a broader swath of the market, and that would explain, you know, why we saw the rebound yesterday and why we're seeing that kind of strength again today.
Let's not forget, Tesla, if you go back to the January 26th high, we are down almost 18%. So that's not only a technical correction, that's almost a technical bear market on the share. So if you believe, and this is, you know, I just went on Bloomberg TV with Matt and Greg, and like, if you believe in the fundamental theory of something or story of something, and you've done the research, you're not necessarily going to just run for the exits when all of a sudden everybody's selling. You know, Tim, right? It's like fundamental research. It's why we try to get to people who are doing it.
And that's what Kathy basically said yesterday. Hey, on a day like that, when you're seeing a pullback with Tesla, you are buying the dip.
Right. And she talks about it. Listen, Dave, we talk about Tesla a lot. Is it a car company? Is it a technology company? Is it a battery company? You know, she throws in that whole other idea of it. It's a data company and how much data it's accumulated, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, I think the data question is a really good one. Dave, what do you make of that? Just taking a step back and thinking about what Tesla did yesterday and people diving back into it.
Well, I mean, there is so much focus on data these days, and you think about Tesla and all the chips that go into its cars, and you can say that about automobiles more broadly, but, you know, you think about big tech again, you know, is Amazon a retailer or is it a collector of data on consumers' buying habits? I mean, you can kind of definitely raise those sorts of issues. There's just one point I want to kind of get to real fast, though.
Sure.
And what's different is that, you know, the kinds of companies that did well last year when the pandemic was raging, you know, we're seeing people kind of take a step back and maybe rethink it. I just got to bring up Lowe's. I mean, the shares are down more than 3%, even though fourth quarter results beat estimates handily, at least the analysts we surveyed. And it's got to be people thinking that, you know, this year can't possibly be as good as last year. You know, when you saw in the fourth quarter alone, sales of stores open more than a year, up 28%. You see Home Depot go down along with Lowe's, and it was lower yesterday after its results as well.
Right. None of us have the crystal ball, but you've got to believe that we see the vaccine rolling out. I know, Tim, we talk about people we know within our spheres getting the vaccine. This has got to help.
Yeah, I mean, every time I hear of somebody I know getting the vaccine, I'm like cry a little bit on the inside in a good way. I'm just so happy to hear it, and it's happening more and more. And look, you got to hope that over the next year, we're not going to be in our homes as much. We're not going to be doing as much home improvement because we did that over last year when we were stuck at home, when there was nowhere else we could go.
We need a little like Belle, like in It's a Wonderful Life, when the angel gets its wings. Every time somebody gets a vaccine, because I felt like for such a long time it was the count about cases and hospitalizations and unfortunately death, and we hit a really big number just recently in the United States here, and it's very, very sobering when you think about those numbers. Having said that, I do feel like we're picking up some momentum with the vaccine, and hopefully it's enough to get ahead of the variants.
Yeah, hopefully. And, you know, over the past couple of weeks, we hit an important milestone with vaccine administration. More people had gotten the vaccine in the U.S. than number of cases have been of COVID. So we're moving far past that.
Just want to mention a Redhead Crossing Fed saying that the operational error that has disrupted several services. CNBC also reporting that the Federal Reserve System is down, an investigation ongoing. So just crossing the Bloomberg as we speak. All right, we've got a lot coming up, including the CEO of EHE Health. Also, we're going to check in with the new CEO over at Marriott, and we're going to also hear from your interview with former National Security Advisor John Bolton. Let's do the Bloomberg Business Week Bite of the Day. One number that tells us a lot, Tim, 15.8 million.
The GameStop frenzy helped generate a fat payout for CFO Jim Bell. The exec is going to get $15.8 million when he exits in March after less than 2 years on the job, and may pocket millions more from share sales in years to come. Bell is said to be resigning as GameStop seeks a CFO more in line with activist investor Ryan Cohen's vision.
It's a Harvard Business School case study right there.
Not a bad payday if you can get it, right?
No, nice on your way
years
out.
On the job.
By a little island, just going to say. All right, let's get to World and National News. For that, over to Nancy Lyons in D.C. Hey, Nance.
Hey there, Carol. U.S. regulators say Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine is safe and effective. The emergency approval brings to 3 the number of vaccines now available to Americans. This still needs to make it through an FDA panel. The FDA says the vaccine was 72% effective in the U.S. trials. Jeff Zients heads the White House Coronavirus Task Force.
The J&J contract is to deliver 100 million doses by the end of June, but we're working to accelerate that delivery schedule.
The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is a single-shot vaccine, and if approved, the first doses would likely be available sometime next month. A large group of big business execs is backing the sweeping stimulus package. More than 150 senior business executives sent a letter of support to congressional leaders. The companies include Goldman Sachs, Google, IBM. The stimulus covers nearly $2 trillion in federal spending and would include $1,400 relief checks to many Americans. The House is expected to hold a floor vote on the measure this Friday. Then it'll be on to the Senate. President Biden's nominee to be the next CIA director has been on Capitol Hill today for his confirmation hearing. William Burns is a career diplomat and has served as ambassador to Russia, among many other posts. He listed China and technology as two of his top priorities if he's confirmed.
CIA will need to relentlessly sharpen its capabilities to understand how rivals use cyber and other technological tools, anticipate, detect, and deter their use, and keep an edge in developing them ourselves.
Burns is expected to easily win confirmation. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nance, really appreciate that update. Carol Massar, Tim Stanovic in our Interactive Broker studio. Find us on YouTube at Bloomberg Global News. We're going to get into this, and I want to get right to it because J&J, I feel like this is the big COVID-19 vaccine news today. Tim, coming out, it's safe and effective according to U.S. regulators. This could be a big step forward in terms of giving Americans another shot. Single dose. I also think about the implications this J&J vaccine has for emerging markets globally getting people vaccinated.
Yeah, this is absolutely fantastic news. Look, to be clear, it was expected, but at the same time, this increases the number of available vaccine in not just the United States, but to many parts significantly. Drew Armstrong, senior editor for healthcare at Bloomberg, was on our show this morning with Dr. Amish Adalja from Johns Hopkins University. I asked Drew how this changes the game when it comes to the U.S. and other parts of the world getting out of the pandemic. And he said the fact that this is a one-shot vaccine is a big deal. And Dr. Adalja also saying, hey, you know, we're used to this 95% or above 95% efficacy rate from Moderna and from Pfizer. Above 70% for efficacy is very good for Johnson & Johnson. And remember, the idea with this is to prevent you from getting sick, very sick, or dying from COVID. And that's what the Johnson & Johnson vaccine does.
And this is what we need to think about it. Right. I think because of those high efficacy rates on Moderna and Pfizer, we've all expected, okay, that's the norm. That's what we should expect. And that anything less is not a good vaccine. But that's not kind of how it works.
Also, you know, whenever we've gotten vaccines in the past, have you ever, you know, done research into the vaccine for how effective? Excuse me, doctor.
Excuse me, Dwayne Reed. That flu vaccine you just put in my arm, how effective is it? No, it's such a good point. Listen, we have talked about this. We've peeled back so many different layers, right, when it comes to this whole process, which is good. We all understand it made us smarter, but we've also like, wait a minute, you know, we're now having a lot more questions.
And, you know, one question that a lot of people have is if I'm offered different vaccine, which one would I get? Any of the vaccine that's available for you.
Tim's like, I'll take them all. I'll take one.
That's doctor's advice. That's not my advice, doctor.
All right, we got more to come. This is Bloomberg.
stocks, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellito. Wednesday rally underway. Equities reverse losses as Fed Chair Jay Powell reaffirmed his view that the economy needs support. Government bond yields climbed along with oil prices. Energy and industrial companies led gains in the S&P 500 index. Right now, the S&P close to session highs, up 39 points. That is an advance now of 1%. The Dow is up 420, up 1.3%. NASDAQ is up 74 for the NASDAQ Composite Index, a gain there of 0.5%. 10 years down 10/30 seconds, 10-year yield 1.37%. Gold is down $8 the ounce at $17.97, a drop of 0.4%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.5%, $63.22 for a barrel of West Texas Intermediate crude. After the bell, we'll be hearing from Booking Holdings, up 3.2%. Also reporting Viacom CBS, up now by 1.3%, and NetApp Inc. will also be reporting up now by 2.5%. Again, recapping a Wednesday rally underway with the S&P up 39, up 1%. I'm Charlie Pellett. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, got it, Charlie. Thank you so much. So we mentioned that key headline, Tim, about J&J's vaccine. Like you said, we knew it was coming. It's another tool in the toolbox to fighting COVID-19.
Yeah, it's those tools that we need to get us on the other side of this pandemic. And joining us now is Dr. David Levy, Chief Executive Officer of EHE Health. He joins us on the phone right here from New York. EHE is a healthcare provider, and Dr. Levy is a public health expert and veteran epidemiologist. Hey, Dr. Levy, thanks so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back.
So what do you make of the J&J news?
It is great news. It's another vaccine, another tool, and it's going to be widely available in the next couple months, and I think it's fantastic. It's highly effective, and we're all looking forward to it.
So you still consider it highly effective, even though it's not as effective as the mRNA vaccines from Moderna and Pfizer-BioNTech?
It is absolutely as effective as in preventing hospitalizations and deaths, and that's what this epidemic is about, reducing, that's what the treatment for the epidemic should be, namely reducing lethality. And it's as good as any of the other two.
Well, and so Tim and I were, Dr. Levy, if I can interrupt for a second, like Tim and I were joking that we don't go to Duane Reade and I get the flu vaccine and I'm like, what's the efficacy? I mean, what is considered the range of a really effective vaccine?
Well, it all depends what you're immunizing for.
Okay.
And so you have to start there. And one of the issues with this particular virus is that it is highly or much more lethal in people over 65 and those people with comorbidities that relate to lifestyle like diabetes, hypertension, and the like. And if you can, in fact, have a vaccine that's targeted specifically at reducing hospitalization and death in those people, you've essentially dropped the lethality of the epidemic, potentially even lower than the lethality of a flu epidemic. So this is a really good piece of news, quite candidly.
Hey, how's the messaging been in general about the vaccine? Because I've been having this debate with some friends recently, because we've heard so much, if you get the vaccine, don't change your behavior. Keep wearing a mask. And I wonder what that does to the way that people think about how we're going to get through this pandemic, and just what is the point of getting the vaccine if you can't change your behavior?
Well, that's a great question. The answer is you want to continue your social distancing, your mask-wearing behavior, as long as the virus is endemic in the community. And that's what herd immunity is about. It's not about eliminating the disease completely. It's about coming to a level of immunity whereby there's no natural community spread. And as we get to a point where there's no natural community spread and we can now basically address and contain any focal outbreak, we can gradually loosen social distancing, mask wearing, and the like. And so it really depends, frankly, at what level the community is with respect to immunity and how soon they get to a situation where you're just going to have these sporadic and fairly well-contained smaller outbreaks. And by the way, that's exactly the same thing with any other kind of infectious disease outbreak like the flu or others.
All right, and that's good to know. I'm curious what you are seeing within your employee base and within the healthcare system about healthcare employees. Is everybody increasingly getting more comfortable, though, about taking the vaccine and getting the vaccine?
Well, look, you hear the same reticence that you have, that we've all heard about getting the vaccine, in particular certain segments of the population that have more mistrust for the vaccine. And I get it and I understand it. But I have kind of like a half cup full point of view on that, which is, this is a brand new technology, particularly the 2 mRNA vaccines. Completely new science. And, at worst, you have 70% of the people who say that they're going to get it right out of the gate. I mean, that's an early adoption factor of 70%, which any CEO producing any product would be thrilled to have. Unfortunately, when we started down this path, we forgot about the marketing and distribution that we probably should have been doing last summer to get people up to a level of comfort. Now, that being said, as you probably...
Or education, right? Not even just marketing, but education.
Well, I have to tell you, it's not even going to be education, in my view, in the future. You're now seeing around the world people talking about vaccine passes and the ability to travel from country to country. The EU is talking about this tomorrow. I think Israel and Greece have already gone into a pact. We've seen the airline industry really talk about this. The truth is, as we learn to live with COVID, we won't eliminate COVID. We'll be living with COVID like we live with influenza. People are going to need to have proof that they're immunized. And I will tell you, if those people want to get, who are reticent to be immunized, stay that way, they won't be able to get back to a normal life. They won't be able to get into a large venue like a Madison Square Garden or maybe a Broadway show or maybe a restaurant. They won't be able to travel to a country where their parents may live unless they can prove that they're immunized. And that's what's going to be driving people to almost full population immunization, is really to get your life back to normal. You're going to be able to have to show proof that, in fact, you have indeed been immunized by one of the vaccines that have been approved.
There's a point.
That's a practical reality.
A point that our colleague Drew Armstrong, senior editor for healthcare, made on Quick Take this morning was that early on in the vaccination process, we saw people who were reticent about getting vaccines or hesitant to get a vaccine.
Right.
Once they saw people in their orbit start to get them, that went away.
Yeah.
They started to get them. So this is happening in real time.
We're definitely seeing that. A question coming in on Twitter. We'll put that to Dr. Levy in just a moment. He is the CEO of EHE Health. It's a healthcare provider, and we'll continue talking about COVID and the vaccine rollout. This is Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com.
All right,
this is Bloomberg Business Week.
You're excited.
I am excited because you and I were just having a discussion. It's a question that came in from Twitter. We're not going to tell you what it is.
But it's about the difference between the mRNA vaccine and the J&J vaccine.
And it's a good question, and I think it goes to disinformation. All right, we gave you too much already, so just stick around and we'll tell you more. Let's get to your top business stories. Another check on that trading day. Here is Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much. Higher across the board, but a story we're continuing to keep an eye on. The Federal Reserve system for interbank payments went down this afternoon, according to a website for payment services operated by the central bank. A spokesman says, quote, a Federal Reserve operational error resulted in disruption of service in several business lines. The outage is widespread across the payment systems maintained by the central bank, including the vital automated clearinghouse system known as Fed ACH and the FedWire Funds Interbank Transfer Service. Goldman Sachs shares up now by 3.6%, trading at a record. Wells Fargo analyst Mike Mayo lifting his price target on the stock. We're looking at a rally on Wall Street today with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing. Equities reversed earlier losses, staging a rally as Fed Chair Jay Powell reaffirms his view that the economy needs support. Right now, the S&P 500 index is up, trading higher now by just about 1.04%, up 40 points. We've got the Dow Jones Industrial Average up 430, up 1.4%. NASDAQ is up 88 for the NASDAQ Composite Index, a gain now of 0.7%. 10-year, the yield there 1.37%. Gold down $6 the ounce at $17.98, down 0.4%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.5%, now at $63.21 a barrel for West Texas Intermediate crude. Regulators say Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine is safe and effective, a key milestone on the path toward giving Americans access to the first shot to work in a single dose. As for Johnson & Johnson shares, they are higher today. J&J up now by 2%. The decline in COVID-19 fatalities is exceeding expectations in the U.S. Virus modelers revising forecasts to reflect a more optimistic outlook heading into March. Lauren Sauer is an assistant professor of emergency medicine at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, and she was interviewed this morning on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
It is a great trend, and we want it to continue, but we don't want people to get too complacent in looking towards that going back to normal, because the numbers were just so high to begin with and things were so bad here. So, it's like keep up the good works sort of message where we continue to do the hard work and move forward those numbers.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Among some of the other vaccine names that we track, we've got Pfizer shares up 0.1%, BioNTech up by 0.8%, AstraZeneca up by 2%, Moderna having a down day, dropping by 3.8%. Recapping, S&P up 40, up 1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. I want to get right back to our guest. Dr. David Levy still with us, Chief Executive Officer at EHE Health. It's a healthcare provider, still with us on the phone from New York. One thing we want to ask you, Dr. Levy, is something that came in to us from one of our Twitter followers and said messenger RNA changes your DNA. So in his book, the JJ vaccine, a regular vaccine, is better than either the Moderna or Pfizer vaccine. What do you say to that?
I have never heard that. I have no idea what he's talking about or to what he's referencing. mRNA is basically just the code against which the cells are, producing the antibodies. It doesn't do fundamentally anything to a human being, to your own DNA. I just don't know of any evidence or anything to substantiate that comment.
But I think it does speak to the reticence that people have when it comes to, quote unquote, new technology. Right? Like you were talking about this idea that having a new product that has 70% adoption is really good, but there are still people who are like, hey, wait a second, I want to see something different.
I completely agree with you. I mean, this is the whole issue because it's kind of a scary notion, a brand new technology. We're creating mRNA, we're putting it in the body. It sounds like DNA, and that's why a broad campaign ought to be introduced that, educates the public in, fairly clear and easy to understand way about what exactly it is that this new science has discovered. And by the way, I think that this is just the beginning. I think many new vaccines in the future are going to be adopting this new technology. It's safe and it's effective, and it's a great advance for humankind. And it's kudos to all those people and all those biologists who've invented it. I mean, it's just a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful advance for science and for humanity. So I think it's just about education, quite frankly.
And to be fair, new, but also it's not something that they just developed overnight. They've been working on it for years.
Well, yeah, for years for other reasons,
right?
And for other reasons, but the funding and the acceleration that coincided together, with the coronavirus pandemic, really has pushed this thing over the goal line. So, there are a lot of great benefits from this.
All right. So, when you look forward, what do you see as kind of our biggest obstacles still in getting us to a post-COVID world?
I think first of all is continuing the immunization campaign and making sure that the supply chain is great. And I think that we're throwing the kitchen sink at that, and people just have to keep on moving at that. The idea of variants is always a wild card out there, but the surest prevention for new variants is the reduction of replication in new human beings who have been infected. And the best way still at that is to maximize immunization. So, keep on moving very, very hard at that. In the meantime, all of the other things need to be really stringent, the social distancing, the masking, and the like. And ultimately, I think as we get back to a more normal situation, we'll be able to start relaxing some of those constraints. But really right now, it's to move hard and fast at immunization in this country as much as possible.
Hey, Dr. Levy, can you talk a little bit about the alarming surge in mental health that we've seen? Anxiety, depression, burnout, and stress. I mean, we're seeing it everywhere.
Yeah, so this is a big problem. We see it in our patients. We see it in many of the employees of our clients. And, this has been going on now for a year. And, we've now been talking about how to bring people safely back to work. And we find that people have gotten into this grind of this is the way life is going to be and always going to be. And it's going to be difficult to get people into kind of a new way of thinking of getting them out of that rut and getting them back into a more normal and socially engaged life. I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges for over the next 6 months. It's not that the people who just don't want to jump out and come back to work. Sure, there's lots of people like me who want to do that, but there are a lot of people who have been really stuck in this rut with an enormous amount of depression, suicidal ideation, as you know, and it's a very big problem. We're beefing up all employers are beefing up support around mental health. We're looking closely at reaching out through telehealth and the like to help support employees. But I think that that's going to be one of the biggest barriers.
Yeah.
But I have to say, once we get through it, once we start to have people bring back to normal, I think we're going to get through that phase.
Normal. Can't wait. Dr. David Levy, thank you so much. CEO at EHE Health. All right, over to World and National News. Over to Nancy Lyons in D.C. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol, another vaccine is close to being approved for emergency use. The FDA says Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 single-dose shot is 72% effective. It'll still need to be approved by an FDA panel, which meets this Friday. But White House Coronavirus Response Coordinator Jeff Zients says it is another positive development.
Obviously, the prospect of a potential third approved vaccine is very encouraging, and will help to increase the overall vaccine supply, which will allow more Americans to get access to getting vaccinated sooner.
J&J has said it will initially be able to provide 4 million doses, but will ramp up production to meet its promise of 100 million doses by the end of June. Well, there's new evidence of racial disparities in the U.S. vaccine rollout. The findings are part of the Bloomberg Vaccine Tracker.
Just one state, New Mexico, has vaccinated more than 10% of its black population, while more than half the states have done that well with white people. Andy Pekos with the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health says more needs to be done to close that gap.
Some of the minority groups as well as inner city populations have been
hit the hardest in terms of severity of infections of COVID-19 makes this issue of equitable vaccine distribution an incredibly important one.
Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
Singer Bruce Springsteen will pay a $500 fine. He has admitted to consuming alcohol in a restricted area, but he was cleared today of other charges in connection with a DUI arrest back in November. His blood alcohol content was found to be well below the legal limit. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. Carol Massar, Tim Stenovic in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio, also on YouTube at Bloomberg Global News. I know if Charlie saw this headline, he would have been all over it. The Federal Reserve's system for interbank payments went down today, this afternoon, according to a website for payment services operated by the U.S. Central Bank. This is our most read story on the Bloomberg right now.
Yeah, it is. A Federal Reserve operational error resulted in disruption of service in several business lines. That's what Jim Strader, a spokesman for the Richmond Fed, said in an emailed statement, quote, "We are restoring services and are communicating with all Federal Reserve Financial Services customers about the status of operations."
And what's interesting is apparently, Tim, this outage, and forgive us, I mean, I'm not an expert on any of this, and I'm looking at some of our great reporting on it so far, and I feel like there's more to be known. But the outage was widespread across the payment systems that are maintained by the Fed. That includes a vital system, the automated clearinghouse system. It's known as, I think, Fed ACH.
Yeah, that's right. It's something that we're all familiar with. If you're transferring amounts of money from one bank account to another bank account, you use the ACH system.
We take it for granted, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be there. And this national system, as you said, processing lots of electronic funds transfers. So you're talking about payroll, Social Security benefits, tax refunds, corporate payments to vendors, and utility payments. This is all coming off of also the Fed's website if you want to go there and find out a little bit more. 62.1 million transactions a day on average are handled this way.
And not only are those aren't small transactions we're talking about. The average transaction in 2019 had a value of just about $1,802. That's the latest year for which data are available. That's 2019. So this is a significant disruption.
Right, but not the first time it happens. Fed suffering two significant disruptions to the payment system services. That happened in 2019, so it does happen. Sounds like I haven't heard of any kind of impact because of it, but it's certainly something that's been on our radar today.
And it's something that we'll continue to bring you updates on as we get them.
Absolutely. Stick around. We've got a lot of great guests still coming up. We've got the new CEO of Marriott International, really going to talk about what's going on when it comes to leisure travel, business travel. So many questions. Tell us what you want to know. This is Bloomberg.
updates, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Jay Powell soothes traders' nerves. 10-year Treasury yields climb past 1.4% before pairing the advance. Equities reverse losses, staged a rally as Fed Chair Jay Powell reaffirmed his view that the economy needs support. Government bond yields climbed along with oil prices. Here's where we stand. The S&P 500 index closed to session highs, up 37 points, up by about 1%. The Dow's up 386 points now, up by 1.2%. NASDAQ holding on to an 85-point gain, up by 0.6%. 10-year yield, 1.38%. We've got gold down $8 the ounce, down 0.5%, $17.97 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude back with a $63 handle, $63.18, up now by 2.5%. Recapping, stocks advance, S&P up 38, up 1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you, Charlie Pellet. February is Black History Month, and throughout the month, Bloomberg Radio is celebrating pivotal moments in U.S. Black history. Here with more is Bloomberg's Renita Young.
On this day in Black history in 1864, Rebecca Lee Crumpler becomes the first Black woman to receive an MD degree. To put that into perspective, in 1860, there were only 300 women out of 54,543 physicians in the United States. None of them were African American. Crumpler first worked as a nurse in Charlestown, Massachusetts, before she was accepted into the New England Female Medical College. It was during a time when male physicians claimed women did not have the physical strength to practice medicine. In 1883, Crumpler released Book of Medical Discourses, which was one of the first medical books written by an African American. That's today in Black history. I'm Renita Young, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Renita, thank you so much. So Bloomberg Business Week had a great cover story back in July. It was about the COVID vaccine frontrunner at the time. It was the work AstraZeneca and the University of Oxford was doing, Tim. And since then, we know that the path forward for Astra's vaccine, it really hasn't been a straight one.
Yeah, we've been hearing a lot about Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, and of course Pfizer and BioNTech. But AstraZeneca, not so much.
Right. We've got an update on them in Bloomberg Business Week, taking a look at some of the new data that the company hopes can kind of get its vaccine back on track. Reporting for the magazine, Bloomberg News healthcare reporter James Payton on the phone in London, along with Bloomberg Business Week editor Jill Weber on the Access line in Brooklyn. James Payton's story, I feel like it's such an important one to kind of understand what's been going on at Astra.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, obviously here in America, Astra hasn't figured into the conversation quite as much, but it is one that's really important in Europe and elsewhere in the world. And it still has potential, and we're about to see some results from a U.S. trial that may clear up some of the confusion. But it's a big may, because the confusion has led to a backlash in Europe, and that's sort of where the story that James and others wrote for this issue of the magazine began. So, James, what did you guys learn? What's been the continent's response to Astra's rollout?
Yeah, well, good to be with you. I mean, we're hearing reports out of Europe in places like Italy and Germany and elsewhere of health workers and others pushing back on this vaccine, basically perceiving it to be less effective in some way, or cause for concern when it comes to possible side effects. And there are local anecdotes, I guess you could call them, circulating of health workers experiencing some bad reactions to the vaccine. Now, the company says these are all consistent with what has been observed in some, participants in clinical trials, but that clearly hasn't helped matters for, AstraZeneca and Oxford, its partner, and there's been a lack of data on the effectiveness in older adults. The vaccine was given the green light for all adults by the European regulator, the equivalent to the FDA out here. But at least 10 EU countries haven't cleared it for people over 65 due to that insufficient evidence. So, in some places, I think last we checked in Germany, only something like 13% of the roughly 1.5 million Astra doses that have been delivered to the country had actually been injected into arms. And it's early days, but obviously that doesn't
that doesn't bode well. So the company is trying to turn that around. Governments also realize they'll need to rely on this vaccine to immunize a large part of the population.
So what do we know about how effective it is, James? Because as you and your colleagues write, since Astra and Oxford announced their initial results last year, data on the vaccine's effectiveness in preventing symptomatic infection have ranged from 60 to 90%, and that's because of dosing amounts and regimens in the trial, different ones.
Exactly, and that is one of the key issues revolves around effectiveness. And you mentioned the other vaccines, Pfizer's, Moderna's. All the companies say over and over again, this isn't a race. It's not a race, but in this case, it turned out to be a race in many ways. Following Pfizer and Moderna was a difficult position to be in. Those companies have attracted most of the attention. You probably recall when they reported their clinical trial results, the numbers were stunning. And even if it wasn't that simple, they appeared to be totally clear and unambiguous. I mean, both attained efficacy levels of around 95%. So that was one number to digest. It was hugely positive. And now AstraZeneca, in Oxford, it's a different story. When they released their results, as you say, there was a wide range of numbers. It was 62%, 90%, finally an average of 70%. It was very confusing, not just for journalists, but for scientists. Everyone was scrambling to make sense of just how effective this vaccine is. And, the takeaway to disease experts is that all these frontrunners, including AstraZeneca, look like they provide comparable and almost complete protection against severe illness and death. So those are the most important factors to consider. So when it comes to those critical outcomes that will end the pandemic, this vaccine is still expected to play a crucial role. But unfortunately, there are all these questions swirling around AstraZeneca and Oxford that have hurt the way the vaccine is perceived.
That was the point that I just wanted to sort of underscore there is like, just because the results have been confusing, there still is I guess you could think of it as like a portfolio vaccine approach here, which is that as long as it keeps people from having severe illnesses, the overwhelming hospitals and hopefully dying, like it may, the AstraZeneca vaccine still may prove a really important role, especially on a global stage. So when you think about that, and then these forthcoming U.S. results, what do we expect? Like, is there any sense that there could be just more confusion? More data equals more confusion?
Definitely. I mean, the U.S. You mentioned the U.S. data. So this is going to be from trials of tens of thousands of participants, and that's going to be coming out in the coming weeks, I think. And that's going to be closely scrutinized and pivotal for the two UK partners. And I think about a quarter of the participants in that study are older than 65, so we should get a good indication of the protection it offers older adults. So AstraZeneca is keen to demonstrate its potency in older people. And I think an FDA decision we've reported is expected as early as April. So this is going to be a key stretch for Astra and Oxford. And as you say, I think you alluded to it, I think it's overlooked sometimes how much the world is counting on this vaccine. I mean, it's huge, assuming it's rolled out and there aren't further delays.
Yeah. And listen, all the doctors that we talk to say you're going to need multiple tools in that toolkit, that COVID toolkit, in order to get control of it. Joel Weber, thank you so much, editor of Bloomberg Business Week. And of course, James Payton, healthcare reporter. Check out his story in Bloomberg Business Week. For those of you listening in New York, D.C., and San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week with Tim and myself, we're going to continue. If you're listening on Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, Bay State Business is next. We're talking Bitcoin, we're talking commodities. You won't want to miss it.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on this Wednesday, February 24th, with the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all rallying. Equities reversed earlier losses, staging a rally as Fed Chair Jay Powell reaffirms his view that the economy needs support. Energy and industrial companies are leading gains in the S&P 500 index, offsetting weakness for technology shares. Right to the numbers, S&P 500 index up 37, a gain of 1%. The Dow is up 394 now, up by 1.3%, while NASDAQ is up 83, a gain of 0.6%. 10-year yield 1.38%. Gold is down $8 the ounce, lower by 0.5%. $17.97 right now on spot gold. West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.4%. $63.17 for a barrel of West Texas Intermediate crude. Well, as for markets and Fed Chair Jay Powell, Julian Emanuel is Chief Equity and Derivative Strategist at BTIG.
Frankly, if you look at how the asset markets have responded in the last couple of weeks, Chair Powell won't come out and say it, but he's probably not too terribly upset that you've seen the equity markets pause and sort of reflect on what's happened.
The KBW Bank Index has climbed to its highest since 2007, boosted by optimism about a recovering U.S. economy and a steepening Treasury yield curve. Regional banks Citizens Financial, Zions Bancorp, and PNC Financial among the top gainers. Other banks are also pushing higher today. Among them, Bank of America, its shares moving higher now by 2.7%. Citigroup is rallying 2.5%. Wells Fargo up by 3%. JP Morgan Chase up by 1.7%. Again, recapping, we've got a Wednesday rally underway with the S&P 500 index up 38 points. That is a gain right now of 1%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Massar and Bloomberg Quick Takes Tim Stenovic on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, you are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar, Tim Stenovic, and a top story that we're watching, folks. We're keeping a lot on our radar, and that includes what's going on with some of the commodity markets, some of the recent gains. We're also watching Bitcoin, commodity, collectible, currency, whatever. We talked about it with ARC's Kathy Wood yesterday. There's been a lot of people buying into it.
Yeah. I mean, if you think, like that is like the story of if we were a year ago, right? Under $4,000 for one Bitcoin.
Nuts.
Yeah, absolutely nuts.
I know, already a story for 2021. So let's talk commodities. Let's talk Bitcoin. Covering it, writing about it all, Bloomberg Intelligence commodity strategist Mike McGlone. He's with us in our New York City bureau. So, Mike, let's start with the commodity trade, because I think, I feel like it sometimes falls below the radar a little bit. You are on it every day. What do we need to know as investors? What do our listeners and watchers on YouTube need to know about some of the moves that we're seeing in oil and some of the other commodities, copper in particular, too?
Kara, I think that's a good place to start. The key thing to remember is crude oil is oversupplied and there's not going to be a lot of demand coming on board. So from an investor standpoint, the producers are just loving the fact that investors are producing the price and pumping the prices a little bit, because my metrics show the hedgers, the commercial hedgers, are kicking up to some of the highest levels ever. So expect a lot of crude oil supply to come back on, and I don't really see a lot of upside from prices here. It's kind of riding that wave of investors and the stock market going up and expecting inflation, but crude oil is just not a good place to do it. Remember, we're replacing it rapidly with technology. Right. But all that technology is increasing demand for metals, most notably copper. The one problem with copper is producers and the semi-traded copper futures are now called commercial hedging. They're now the highest ever. So they're bringing on supply. They're hedging their supply because they know this is the upper end of the range for the last 15 years.
Hey, Mike, what is what you're seeing in the commodities market right now? What story does that tell you about the economy?
Well, it says the story's telling it's reflation, but in commodities, it's a much different story. This is just bouncing up the upper end of the range, most notably crude oil. If you're looking for reflation in commodities from an investor standpoint, let's go to natural gas. It's down almost 80 to 90% from its peak, yet it's used for everything now in this country, most notably electricity and heating. Yet there's just so much supply because of more technology. Now, we had a pop recently in Texas, but that was more local. The thing to remember about natural gas is despite the fact that we've had another really cold winter, the price is averaging below $3. And the last time the Fed went to zero for a full year in 2009, it was above 4. So commodities are a good leading indicator of deflationary trends, and it's a good reason the Fed can keep things loose, because they're just not getting that. And the thing people always got to remember is rapidly advancing technology, bringing on supply, but in energy also reducing demand.
Well, like this is where, Mike, we've got to step back, slow down a little bit, and kind of take a look at how our world is evolving, right? And we love to talk about the disruption to innovation, but there are things going on, especially in the energy market, where it will impact those longer-term trends.
Exactly. That was a key point that Kathy Wood said yesterday. She expects the average price of an EV to drop to about $18,000 in the next 5 years or so. So what is that? I mean, that's just example of rapidly advancing technology. All these new EVs, they use less, eventually no petroleum, and they're becoming more cost effective just because we're advancing so rapidly. So when I see people getting bullish commodities, I say, okay, go to metals. Number one, they're easy to store. They're part of that clean energy world, decarbonization, electrification, and you can hold them better. But natural gas, crude oil running near 63 here, I've at the upper end of the range, and I say good luck with people are expecting 100, because one thing also remember is the rule in commodities is higher prices are the cure for higher prices. This is bringing on massive supply that was lost because of the virus last year. The supply is coming right back at these levels.
It's like surge pricing, right? All of a sudden we get more supply. I got to say, Mike, I've always liked you, but I like you even more when you're touting an interview with Kathy Wood that Tim and I did yesterday. So love you. She talked to us about a lot. We really got a lot out of our conversation. She also likes Bitcoin, and here's what our co-founder, CEO, and CIO, Kathy Wood, had to say about the cryptocurrency.
We're very positive on Bitcoin. Again, very happy to see a healthy correction here. No market is straight up. Everyone should know that. Everyone should have some dry powder for days like these, and I've been saying that for a while.
All right, and that, of course, was ARC's Kathy Wood. What's your take on Bitcoin at this point?
Higher. I think it's going to consolidate around this 50,000 resistance for a while, which was near $1 trillion. It might drop to 40,000, but to me, the next key level for Bitcoin is around $100,000. And that's basically, just adding a zero to last year's lock-in price around 10,000. And people like Kathy Woods get it. They see this is a potential digital reserve asset in a world that's going digital. And I see gold flows going that way, institutional flows going that way. And anytime it calms down, those bids are generally raised higher. So something's going to trip it up that I don't expect. Well, the price, it should just keep doing what it's been doing in its history, and that's been appreciating.
And to what she says is things don't go up in a straight line. Like, we have to remember that. Those of us who've been in the markets for a long time, like Tim, right, we understand that things don't just go higher and higher and higher. There are pullbacks.
Yeah, just look at a 5-year chart, look at a 10-year chart, look at a 15-year chart. But in general, it absolutely makes sense. Hey, Mike, what about what you said about Bitcoin maybe going to 40,000? Are the days of like a $5,000 Bitcoin, are those gone? Are those done?
Yes, I think
you said 100,000. Didn't you say?
He said 100,000 for like how high it could get, 40,000 for how low it could get.
Okay.
I think the biggest risk right now is getting to near 40. Remember, that was the level that it was. That was resistance before the announcement that Tesla was allocating to it. To me, that was a major shift. That was an inflection point. The world's largest automaker by market cap, diversifying some of its wealth in Bitcoin makes sense that, okay, Bitcoin's got value. They think so. So I think 40,000 is like a worst case. Last year it was around 5,000. But upside, we should be, I'm particularly looking for the next key threshold is around $100,000.
And look, yesterday we got the news from Square, $170 million more Bitcoin on its balance sheet.
Yeah. Mike, still collectible?
Yes, it's clearly collectible, and that's one thing I'm seeing the economists and someone like Janet Yellen are missing. It's not a currency.
Yeah.
You don't want to knock it around every day like the dollar, and you can. In the digital world, dollar's dominant. but collectible, that's easy to transport, easy to transact 24/7, and no one can take it from you. That's never been available in human history. Gold was the last example.
Right. Well, and Kathy talked about the security issue big time.
I have all my Bitcoin on my mantle, just in a big black
under your
big
bed
box. Yeah.
Mike McClone, we love you.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, commodity strategist at Bloomberg Intelligence here in our bureau. All right, back to World and National News. Back on over to Nancy. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. Free masks will soon be available in communities hardest hit by the coronavirus. That announcement today from White House COVID coordinator Jeff Zients.
Any American who needs a mask will be able to walk into these health centers or food pantries and pick up high-quality, American-made masks.
It's part of the president's effort to ensure equity in the government's response to the coronavirus. President Biden has asked all Americans to wear face masks for the first 100 days of his term. The Biden administration says it will still work to bring order and humanity to our immigration system, despite a federal judge's order late last night placing an indefinite ban on the president's pause on most deportations. We get more on that from Bloomberg's Amy Morris in Washington.
President Biden had proposed the 100-day pause on deportations during his campaign as part of a larger review of immigration enforcement and an attempt to reverse the priorities of former President Trump. U.S. District Judge Drew Tipton issued the injunction sought by Texas, which had argued the moratorium violated federal law and risked imposing additional costs on the state. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says President Biden understands the U.S. role in helping resolve the diplomatic standoff between Canada and China. Trudeau met with Biden yesterday in Washington. Trudeau tells Bloomberg Biden is willing to help gain the release of 2 Canadians currently detained in China. They were taken into custody just days after Huawei's chief financial officer was arrested in Vancouver on a U.S. extradition request. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much. Nancy Lyons with a World and National News update there in D.C. So this story among our most read, Tim.
Yeah, it's not surprising. Last night, if you were on Twitter at all at around 9 o'clock, you saw that there was going to be a live stream between Dave Portnoy of Barstool Sports fame and Vlad Tenev of Robinhood fame.
And the boxing gloves were on.
Yeah, it delivered.
Did you listen to it? Have you?
So I saw clips of it. I was actually listening to I was in Clubhouse at that time.
Were
last
you?
Night. I was listening to.
You're so cool.
I'm not cool. You're not cool if at night you're listening. You're just sitting in a room on Clubhouse, Carol. I got news for you.
Was it a good conversation?
Yeah, it was a really good conversation. It was actually about like Robinhood, fintech. So there was, it was, but I did check over onto Portnoy's Twitter feed because he was posting live updates there. And look, the gloves did come off. And I will say, good for Vlad for actually going on. I'm surprised he did it. If you're a communications person who works at Robinhood, like you're probably, I would imagine you're thinking, wait, this probably isn't the best idea, but go for it.
Can I say, though, I find it really refreshing. And in terms of innovation disruption, this whole idea of when there's a problem, often you see companies kind of hunker down and not come out. And I think this is what you need, especially, listen, I feel like their existence kind of depends on this because they've got to explain how the platform works, what happened, why did the trading shut down? Otherwise, their users might start to back off.
Yeah, I mean, you could say it was more intense questioning than he got on Capitol Hill last week. That's for sure.
And it was about Robinhood's decision to curb trading.
It absolutely was. And Portnoy's been a huge critic of it. And I will say I was following along because Ms. Elena Agafopoulou, who wrote this story, was live tweeting it as it was happening, which was super helpful. So I could kind of multitask and see what was happening between Portnoy and Tenev and at the same time listen to this Clubhouse.
Is this like Mystery Science Theater or what is it like?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, what am I doing at night?
Listen, we're all trying to understand these new platforms. So kudos to the Robinhood CEO for coming out and taking those questions. You can check out that story and more at Bloomberg.com. This is Bloomberg Radio.
events, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Powell soothes traders' nerves. Stocks reverse losses. We've got a rally underway on Wall Street. Right now, let's head right over to the first word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. Like yesterday, stocks with another aggressive bounce off those morning lows. Dow's currently up 413 points. Was down 116. S&Ps are higher by 39. NASDAQ climbs by 90. U.S. 10-year yield at 1.38%. Gold is down 8. And transports gained 232 points. Among the main 11 SP sectors, energy and industrials led. Only utilities were under pressure. And leaders to the upside in the Dow, Boeing, Chevron, and Visa, while Home Depot fell 2.7% and led to the downside. After earnings, Square fell as much as 10%. And in other news, Royal Caribbean's price target raised to a street high 117 over at Credit Suisse. The stock was at 19 in March. FDA staff found J&J's COVID-19 vaccine is safe and effective. And MicroStrategy bought another $1 billion in Bitcoin. Wrapping things up, Booking, NetApp, and Viacom CBS. I'll report after the bell. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, I thank you very much, Bill. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk, SQUAWK on your terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you very much. Well, this caught our attention. You were talking about this on one of our planning calls today, Tim, about how the capital is being turned into a fortress is really kind of bringing on the push to make it a state.
A state. And look, D.C. statehood has been something that liberals and Democrats have wanted for a very long time. Right. The big question, is it ever going to happen?
Yeah, so let's put that question to Amanda Colson-Hurley. She's politics editor at Bloomberg Business Week. She's with us from the nation's capital. Amanda, good to have you here with Tim and myself. So tell us a little bit about well, first of all, give us a visual. And I know we're on radio, we're on YouTube for those who are also watching there. But give us the visual of what D.C. is like right now.
Sure. So I actually went down to the area around the Capitol on Sunday and walked all around. The Capitol, as well as a number of the well-known landmarks nearby, like the U.S. Supreme Court, the Library of Congress, are all behind a big fence, a 7-foot-tall fence topped in most parts with these coils of razor wire. There are troops patrolling, stationed every 100, 200 feet or so, little clumps of troops. And so really there's this kind of compound now on Capitol Hill that's about 3 miles in circumference. So it's a very a dramatic difference from that area. If anyone has, been there before as a tourist or as a local, which used to be quite open, obviously a great attraction for visitors. Very very famous views of the Capitol Dome. So it's all looking pretty different right now.
If you're watching us on YouTube right now, you see some of these images that Amanda took, that she took and she sent to us. Amanda, I got to ask what the connection is here with D.C. statehood, right? The relationship between the federal government and the district and law enforcement.
Well, right. As you said just now, the push for statehood in D.C. is not something that's sprung up overnight. I mean, it's been years, decades that, some activists have been pushing for D.C. to become a state. But I think a couple of things happened. First of all, the Democrats won the White House and both houses of Congress, although they control the Senate very narrowly. And this gave statehood advocates really the best kind of window that they've had in a long time, probably ever. More, prominent Democrats have said they support statehood in recent years. President Biden has said in the past that D.C. should be a state.
So there is some kind of momentum, and I think, meanwhile, the events of January 6th, left a lot of people in D.C., both the kind of elected local leaders there and just regular residents, feeling more at odds with the federal government. And this fence kind of symbolizes that, right? It was imposed, this temporary fence that's there now was imposed, immediately. And people kind of understand that it needs to be there. I think it reassured people, especially in the initial days after the riot. But now there's this proposal to put up a permanent fence. And, as one person I interviewed said to me, we already don't have any representation in Congress, and now they're kind of walling it off for us, from us in addition to that.
What's the political will to make a change? And I'm just curious, Republicans versus Democrats on this.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a pretty clear split there in that D.C. statehood is much more favored, by Democrats, by liberals. And part of the reason for that is that, the district, which has 700,000 people now, is, one of the most solidly Democratic voting places in the country. People don't vote for, they don't have a voting representative in the House or senators who can vote, but they do vote for president, and I think they voted for Joe Biden more strongly than anywhere else in the country. I mean, there are other reasons too, in that there are objections on the grounds that it would not be constitutional, that D.C. was really intended to be a federal district. So the objections are not entirely partisan, but that is definitely part of it.
So, Amanda, very briefly, look, it makes sense that Democrats want D.C. to be a state. For politically, it makes sense. But is there a chance that it happens in the near future? Any chance at all? And we only have about 20 seconds. Oh, we don't. We actually we can have more time with you. I'm sorry. We get more time with you, Amanda.
We say Amanda's on. We're just going to go.
Well, I mean, I think the answer is still pretty succinct, which is they have their best window they've ever had right now, but it's still pretty slim. I think they're not going to get 60 votes in the Senate to pass statehood. They would have to sort of either eliminate or kind of work around the filibuster. I think there are, ways they could make a rule change where they would say statehood votes don't need, 60 votes. But even that seems like it would require an expenditure of political capital that perhaps, not everyone would be enthusiastic about, even among the Democrats.
So it makes me wonder what our forefathers would think. But I do wonder, Amanda Hurley, what kind of a state would it be if it was on its own? Is there a state across the U.S. that it kind of is similar to?
Well, let's see. In population terms, it's the most similar, I believe, to Vermont and Wyoming, with 700,000 people. But it would be, it would have the highest share of Black residents of any state. As I said before, it would be very solidly Democratic voting, at least for the time being, and it would still have this kind of federal district at the very heart of it, where all of the government buildings and the National Mall and monuments would be. So it's not like that's going to go away. That would just shrink, and DC would otherwise kind of have the powers of a state. But I think that means that whatever happens, that tension between the district and the federal government is never going to go away entirely because of that.
What about people in Washington, D.C.? I mean, do they want this to happen? How do they feel about this?
Yeah, I think the last time there was a poll or survey done, support, at least for a statehood referendum, was at 86%. So, and a lot of the local political leaders are pretty strong statehood proponents. The non-voting congresswoman for the district, Eleanor Holmes Norton, has introduced a statehood bill into the House, year after year after year. Certainly a number, if not all, of the members of the district, the DC Council as well. support statehood. It's a pretty common sentiment. Even the DC license plate, if you've ever seen it, the standard motto on the license plate is "End taxation without representation." So people do feel pretty strongly about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty clear. What about people like beyond DC, like the rest of the country? Are people do they have any strong feelings about it?
Yeah, I think in the rest of the country, I think a lot of people sort of don't think a lot, as understandably about the issue and what it means to district residents. I think the last time there was a Gallup poll a couple of years ago, and support for DC statehood was not very high. It was, I think, around 30% or even lower. And a lot of people feel that maybe, it shouldn't be a state, maybe because they think it's, very small or that it's, maybe they think it's for partisan reasons only that people would want it to become a state. So, yeah, it's not an issue that I would say has attracted really broad support outside of the D.C. area.
Are there certain members of Congress right now who are sort of surprising on the issue? Like, are there any Republicans who support this, or do they know this is just so dangerous politically?
That's a good question. I'm actually not aware if any Republicans have come out and said, you know what, D.C. residents should be able to, have representation in Congress too.
And look, it is dangerous politically for them because the margins right now are razor tight. And if D.C. were to become a state, think about who that enfranchises, right? A group of voters who largely voted, as you mentioned, Amanda, for President Biden now. And also it would give them senators who would likely be Democrats and really change the balance of power.
That's right. I mean, the D.C. senators, if it had them, would almost certainly be Democrats, two Democrats, which would, in the current situation, easily, tip control of the Senate, from this 50-50 split.
Right.
Easily tip it over to the Democrats and giving them a kind of margin. So yeah, I do think that it's kind of a paradox of the current situation for statehood advocates that while having this Democratic trifecta in Washington gives them this opportunity that they're excited about, having this 50-50 split also probably illustrates for Republicans and for other opponents just how much of a difference it would make if the district were to become a state, and how that would change the political calculus.
Yeah, and does it open the door then for Puerto Rico or something? I don't know. Like, who knows? But it's very provocative, and those visuals, I highly recommend everybody go to Bloomberg.com and see a little bit of that more. Amanda, thank you. Amanda Colson-Hurley, politics editor at Bloomberg Business Week from the nation's capital. Quick check on the markets for you. Just got 30 minutes to go until the close of trading. We're hovering near our highs of the session, well off our lows. Saw a little bit of selling early on. Now the S&P 500 up 1.1%. Dow Jones Industrial Average up 432 points, a gain of 1.4%. NASDAQ also higher, definitely off its lows, up about 110 points. Tim, that's good for a gain of just about 0.8%. We had a big story, a big business story over the past week, and this is about Marriott International naming Tony Capuano as Chief Executive Officer, tapping someone who is well known to the company to really lead this hotel giant's recovery after the COVID-19 pandemic. So we are delighted to welcome Tony to Bloomberg Business Week. He joins us on the phone in Bethesda, Maryland. Tony, great to have you here with Tim and myself. How are you? And I have to say, many of us here at Bloomberg, we've been thinking about you and the Marriott family after the loss of Arnie Sorensen. He was always so generous with his time to so many of us here at Bloomberg, and especially over the last year when we know personally and professionally he was dealing with so much.
Well, thank you, Carol, and thanks for having me back. It's obviously been a tough week for all of us. I talked to our team around the world over the last few days, and the two words that I really thought about were reflection and resolve. All of us are reflecting on this terrible loss, the loss for Arnie's family, the loss for the extended Marriott family, and the loss for the business community more broadly, as you suggested. But I think there is a real resolve here. This is a company that is approaching its 94th anniversary, and we've been through recessions and 9/11 and the great financial crisis and the pandemic. And it's a company that has the resolve to continue to build and grow and create opportunities for our folks and really help the company realize its promise. But it's been a difficult week.
No, and you've really all been on our minds. And you talk about family and you think about the Marriott family, your franchise owners. You treat them like they are family members. Tell me how they are doing in this environment and what it looks like going forward this year and then beyond.
Well, the pandemic is obviously a historic and terrible crisis from a whole host of perspectives. The travel industry has been hit particularly hard, and a lot of the weight of that impact has fallen on the shoulders of our owners and franchisees. They are under tremendous financial pressure. Some of the hotels at the outset of the pandemic, we had hundreds of hotels close. On a global basis, we were running 12% occupancy, and that created great distress for our owner community. As we've seen through the last number of months, we are seeing slow and steady recovery, particularly domestically in drive-to destinations. Interestingly, China, which seems to have its arms relatively around the virus, we're seeing occupancy levels approaching pre-pandemic, which is quite encouraging and maybe represents a bit of a roadmap for the rest of the world. But at the same time, we continue to see instances where there's a spike in infection rates in a given market, and it has a pretty stark chilling impact on the pace of demand growth.
Tony, you ran the you ran the company's hygiene initiative. What should customers expect if they haven't traveled to a Marriott property in a few years or since the pandemic started? How will that experience be different post-pandemic?
I think in a few ways. I think really starting during the booking process, when they go to Marriott.com to make their reservations, there are pretty thorough and transparent disclosures about any modifications we've made to the operations of a given hotel, whether there are outlets that are closed, that have limitations on capacity, or modified hours. When they arrive, they will see every one of their fellow guests and every Marriott associate in masks. They will see electrostatic cleaners disinfecting the public areas. They will have optionality around whether they want daily housekeeping, but they know that when they arrive in their room for the first time, that there is a hospital-grade level of cleaning that's been done to that room before their arrival. And they will experience a lot of advances that we've made from a technology perspective to make it as touchless an environment as possible. We've made some pretty significant upgrades to the Bonvoy app and the ability to check in remotely, to order room service remotely. There's a chat function to talk to the hotel staff if there are service requests. And so I think those are the most significant changes.
How much of it stays with us, Tony? Listen, you're someone who I know used to travel, I'm assuming, a lot, and we can talk about how much traveling you've been doing. I used to travel a lot, haven't done much in 12 months. How much of what changes in the hotel industry, the hospitality industry, really stays with us longer term? Like, it sounds like some of the digitization and the apps, like that to me sounds like a great thing. I'm hoping there's a day when I can walk into a hotel lobby and I don't have a mask on and I don't have to be so worried. And I like housekeeping, I'm just going to say. So I'm just curious, how much stays with us, do you think, longer term?
Yeah, all of these decisions are often informed by what we hear from our guests, but I think your intuition is right. When I look across all the changes we've had to make in response to the pandemic, I think the technological advances, the optionality of touchless experiences, I think those will continue post-pandemic. The nice thing will be, to your point, we all aspire to get to a place where no one has a mask, there are no plexiglass barriers. And then it will really be based upon guest preference. There are some guests that love to go to the front desk, engage with our associates, get local restaurant recommendations. And there are others that want to check in, get a mobile key, and go straight to their room. And I think we all look forward to the day where we can offer both of those options to our guests.
Hey, Tony, we saw something really interesting happen at the beginning of the pandemic. When lockdown started back in March, Airbnb really struggled, and they struggled very quickly and laid off employees. And then a few months later, the company really started to recover as people wanted to spend a long time in homes away from their primary residences. I'm wondering how you think about Airbnb and how you're thinking about competition from Airbnb over the next few years.
Well, Tim, we, as you know, in 2019, we launched Marriott Homes and Villas, not with an eye towards going head-to-head with Airbnb. I don't think we'll find ourselves in the business of traditional home sharing or couch surfing or any of those areas. But we've really focused on the upper end of the market and whole home rentals. And we think the value proposition that we offer is really predicated on consumer confidence around safety, a service level that our customers expect, and a linkage to the Bonvoy loyalty program. And since that 2019 launch, where we had about 2,000 homes, we've grown to over 25,000 homes. We think in a few short months, we'll be on every continent. And the thing we like about that business, we hear from our customers that for very specific trip types, they like the notion of whole home rentals. And by launching this platform, it allows us to keep them within the Marriott ecosphere.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey, Tony, one thing I want to ask you, you guys have so many different brands under your umbrella. There's the Ritz-Carlton, there's St. Regis, there's the W, there's Sheraton, there's Home and Villa. I mean, there's just so many. Does everything stay with you going forward, or do you kind of take this time to look at the business and say maybe we do some consolidation of brands? I know each brand kind of has its market, but I do wonder how you look and maybe change the business, tweak it going forward.
Yeah, Carol, we actually love the breadth of our brand portfolio, and I think we like it because of the choice that it offers, certainly the choice to our consumers, but also to our owners and franchisees. We find from a consumer perspective, depending on trip type, they may choose one of the hotels in our portfolio in the economy tier. Then they may plan a family vacation and go to a luxury resort. And similarly, the vast majority of our owner community are multi-unit owners, and they would like to continue to grow their portfolios within the Marriott family. Having that breadth of choice gives them lots of options as they look to continue to invest in the Marriott flags.
So Tim and I, Tony, cannot wait to get back on a plane. For fun, for work, I cannot wait. I've missed it. Have you been traveling much for work or traveling at all?
I have, although I think the last time I was in studio with you, you were shaking your head at a number I shared with you that I had been traveled 225 nights the prior year. I'm obviously at a small fraction of that today. And unfortunately, because of some of the borders that are closed, I'm not traveling internationally nearly as much as I would like. But I've been in New York, I've been in Los Angeles, I've been in Miami, visiting our teams and our associates across the country. And I have my passport in my back pocket, and I am ready as soon as some of the borders start to open.
I'm jealous. Business travel, how long do you think before it really comes back to what we saw pre-pandemic?
Well, there are, as you know, Carol, there are lots of opinions out there about whether we've seen some sort of permanent change in the demand for business travel. And time will tell which of those opinions is accurate. As we talk to our customers around the world, we certainly think leisure will lead the recovery, but we are already seeing green shoots for business transient demand. And we think fundamentally that is a business that will come back strong. What we hear from our customers, not dissimilar to you and Tim's comments, they miss being on the road. They miss visiting their business partners, and maybe most importantly, they miss visiting their customers. And so we're quite optimistic about the long-term demand for business travel.
Hey, very briefly,
the
Tony,
only other thing I would say to you is, sorry?
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, the one thing that may shift a bit, Carol, about business travel, as folks have gotten more and more comfortable conducting business over Zoom or Microsoft Teams, they have started to learn that perhaps they can do a better job blending leisure and business travel. And so there will certainly be certain business purposes where they need to be in person, but they may also say to their family, Let's go for 3 or 4 days of vacation, and I'll carve out a day in the middle and conduct business via technology.
All right. Great stuff. Listen, thank you so much. You two, so gracious with your time. We really appreciate it. And again, we're thinking about all of you guys over at Marriott. Tony, be well. Stay safe. Tony Capuano, he is Chief Executive Officer at Marriott International, on the phone from Bethesda, Maryland. All right, back on over to Nancy Lyons with a check on world and national news. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy is promising he'll soon unveil a comprehensive plan to stop the red ink from pouring out of the U.S. Postal Service, with fewer Americans writing letters and putting checks in the mail. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman has more from Washington.
Joy described his abortive attempt to end overuse of delivery vehicles.
It really had a negative impact on service for about 2 or 3 weeks, but it did in fact recover within about a month.
Joy said his new plan is the result of 8 months of study.
This is a balanced plan when it comes forward, should bring us to nearly break even over the next 10 years. And good sir.
Congress is taking up a bill to repeal advance funding of pensions and also put retirees on Medicare. DeJoy said that would cover about 1/3 of the projected $160 billion 10-year deficit he is dealing with. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Well, golfer Tiger Woods is recovering from severe leg injuries following a solo car crash yesterday in steep terrain near Los Angeles. His doctors say he had significant orthopedic injuries to his right leg and ankle. The PGA Tour carried a news conference with Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan today, who says it may be difficult for golfers to focus right now.
This is a tough moment. It's not an easy week to play golf when the person that you idolize, the person that's your inspiration, the person that has gotten you into this game, the person that has created a lot of opportunity for you is hurt.
Some of Wood's fractures went through the skin and were stabilized by a rod, while screws and pins were used for his ankle and foot injuries. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons. Now let's get a business flash from Charlie Pellet.
All right, I thank you very much. And here's what's going on. We've got 16 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell on this Wednesday, with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all rallying. Equities reversed earlier losses, staging a rally right now as Fed Chair Jay Powell reaffirms his view that the economy needs support. Government bond yields climbed along with oil prices. Right to the numbers, 10-year yield now 1.38%. S&P's up 41. That is a gain of 1.1%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 428, higher by 1.4%. NASDAQ up 107, a gain there of 0.8%. Gold is down $4.59 the ounce to $1,801, fluctuating above and below the $1,800 threshold, lower now by 0.3%. West Texas Intermediate crude looking at a one-year high, up 2.5%, up $1.55 a barrel, 63.22 for a barrel of WTI. Travel stocks are surging today, among them the airlines, looking at an 8.8% jump right now for United. American Airlines Group up 5.8%, Delta up by 2.7%, Southwest Airlines shares up now by 4.6%. Some of the names scheduled to report after the closing bell: Booking Holdings up 3.6%, Viacom CBS up 1.9%, and NetApp Inc. up now by 3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Charlie Pellet. This is Bloomberg.
All right.
This is a good one for today.
It's a great one.
What's the connection, Dave?
All right, so you want to know the connection. Suppose you came up with your own definition for SPAC.
Okay.
Yeah, listening.
Well, all right. We know it as short for Special Purpose Acquisition Company or Blank Check Company. It's all the rage. All these companies are making deals left, right, and center. But I was looking at this note yesterday from Dan Suzuki, who's the Deputy Chief Investment Officer at Richard Bernstein Advisors, and he came up with a different phrase that SPAC would stand for.
Mm-hmm.
Stronger profits at attractive costs. So that's his thought in terms of the kind of stocks you want to own as opposed to the blank check companies. Now, where are you going to find these stocks, you might ask? Well, Suzuki has a few suggestions on that score, and that's what the chart focuses on. Areas of the market which have really kind of fallen out of favor over the past several years when you look at their weightings. And there are three themes he picks up on. One is looking at international stocks rather than U.S., which has been pretty popular for many years. The second is to go for smaller and mid-sized companies as opposed to larger ones that have been so dominant, if you're looking in the U.S. market. And the third would be to go for the cyclical stocks. Now, I mentioned this earlier, the whole idea of focusing in on energy companies, raw material producers, industrial companies, financial businesses, those four groups together. They've lost weight over time within the S&P 500 in the same way that the smaller and mid-sized companies have lost weight within the Russell 3000 index, Russell's broadest gauge of U.S. shares, and the same way that the international companies have kind of shrunk as a percentage of the MSCI All Country World Index, the broadest indicator, one of them you can find for stocks worldwide. So that's sort of the thesis here, that SPAC maybe has a different meaning, and it's something to think about in terms of an approach to stock investing here. And if you want to know more, folks, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
Got it, Dave. Thank you so much. This is Bloomberg.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home? Honey, please, I'll do the driving. Drive on. Excuse me, I want to drive.
Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the drive to the close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, just about 11 minutes left in today's trading session. Another day where we saw some selling and then buyers coming back into the trade, Tim. So let's get to Dan Morgan, VP and Senior Portfolio Manager over at Synovus Trust Company. They've got roughly $20.6 billion in assets under management. He's with us once again on the phone in Atlanta. Dan, good to have you here with us. How you doing?
Hi, Carol. Hi, Tim. How are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. God, have we not talked to you since, I guess?
Yeah, not yet. We did a bunch of stories kind of in the, tail end of last year, but then things got crazy with the election. And so, but we're back today talking chips.
Yeah, well, listen, this is a big story. NVIDIA is going to be out after the closing bell, but we are all focused here at Bloomberg, watching the administration, watching the industry, because these chip shortages, what do we need to know about this and what needs to be done?
Well, you're right. You know what, Carol? It's really interesting because last time we talked about how a large percentage of chips are actually built outside the U.S., right? Over in the Pacific Rim. We have all the engineering, marketing, and design skills here, but most of our plants are fabless, which means we don't produce the chips here. And there was actually, you and I talked about it. Then all of a sudden I noticed a couple of weeks ago, or in the last 10 days, all the chip companies got together and signed a letter and sent it to President Biden saying, we need to start building chips here in the U.S. And how better way to get rid of some of these shortages than to have control of your supply? And right now, unfortunately, we don't have that. And that's what's causing these shortages and these problems. But of course, Carol, you and I were already ahead of the ball here in terms of identifying that issue before it became a major story.
Hey, Dan, just in the last few minutes, CNBC reporting that GM says the worst of the global chip shortage may be behind it. Is that something that you're seeing at all?
Well, I think so. I mean, if we think about what's happening in the semiconductor business right now in terms of the overall cyclical recovery, and you think about, let's say, autos and industrials, which have been coming back very strongly. And I know at one point we had some shutdowns, right, with some of the auto manufacturers where they couldn't even deliver certain models because they couldn't get the chip. So slowly that's starting to unthaw a little bit. And, if we look at just a week ago, Analog Devices reported numbers and their auto division was up 19% in terms of revenue. So I think that's getting behind us and things are getting better. But it'd be great if we could move those facilities here to the U.S. and we wouldn't have any problems.
So,
just kidding.
Yes, everything would be solved.
That's an entirely different conversation.
Oh, that it were so. Hey, but Dan, wait a minute. Listen, you're much smarter than I when it comes to chips. There's lots of different kinds of chips. Are you talking about that we need to bring all kinds of chip manufacturing back to the United States?
Well, you're right. I mean, we talk about the autos, industrials. One thing we always say, Carol, is that not every chip company is exactly the same. So, I mean, when I say every, it would just be good to have a larger percentage of the chips produced here domestically to kind of meet some of these areas that are really going to continue to be kind of secular growth stories. And we've talked about this before, Carol and Tim, the cloud, which we all know is a great space, gaming, and then this huge 5G rollout, especially in not only with smartphones, with, let's say, an Apple, but also from the communications infrastructure, perspective in terms of rolling out the base stations in terms of 5G. So I don't know if we can get all of these areas here in the U.S. domestic, but if we could get a larger percentage, because I think at this point, we talked about this before, Carol, I think it was like 80-90% was being produced outside the U.S. It was a huge number.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk more NVIDIA, company reporting earnings after the bell today. Speaking of chips, what would you ask management if you had the opportunity to do so?
Well, I think, Tim, obviously we're going to be following expectations in terms of data center revenue, which is about $1.88 billion, gaming at $2.39 billion. I think something that's been kind of a hot topic has been how is this acquisition is coming along in regards to the ARM deal. That was something that's somewhat controversial. It really gives them a leg up in artificial intelligence, but they have about a 39% market share, and they're kind of ahead of some of these other, players in that space. Xilinx is in that space, Lattice. So it's kind of interesting to see if we can get a little bit more color from management. If that deal will in fact go through, there's been some pushback from some of the other chip makers that saying, hey, we don't want ARM to be owned by NVIDIA. So I think that could be on the center stage beyond just hitting those targets in terms of revenues. Is that deal going to go through?
Well, that's where I wanted to go. I mean, there's some big companies requesting this acquisition. Yeah. Google, Microsoft, Qualcomm. I mean, some of the world's largest technology companies, they're complaining to U.S. antitrust regulators. When you look at that deal from an antitrust perspective, as an analyst, as an investor, do you think there's a problem?
Well, Carol, for listeners out there that aren't familiar with the model, right, it's kind of like a Qualcomm, right? Mm-hmm. They are an intellectual property model, which is they collect fees in regards to their, what they're providing in terms of the designs and so forth. They're not like a company that produces chips like, let's say, Intel and, turns out microprocessors and sells them to PC manufacturers. So they're a little bit of a different animal. And the fact that they work with so many other chip companies in terms of providing this intellectual property, that could be somewhat of a monopoly, right, that NVIDIA would have over this company that's so different. It's not just like a company that produces more gaming chips. So I think that is kind of interesting, Carol, like you said, that we're getting this pushback. And could this be an antitrust issue that then derails the deal? Because everybody's saying, wow, this would be a sweet deal for NVIDIA, but not so good for everybody else.
So do you think it happens?
Well, I'm hopeful. I mean, that's why you mentioned, Tim, in the beginning about what we want to hear from management. I think that's got to be on center stage, right? How's that deal coming along? What's the issues with the DOJ or, antitrust issues, and if that, will consummate. So I'm hopeful and optimistic they can execute the deal. I think it'd be great for them, as I mentioned, in AI. And hopefully they can set up some firewalls where they're not interfering with other companies that are using ARM in terms of some of these designs, and then creating some sort of competitive advantage. I think that's what everybody's really worried about.
Hey, just 20 seconds here. The tech pullback rally. Any thoughts on it?
Well, it's interesting, Carol, because tech made such a huge run. It did so well. I mean, I was just looking at the charts because we've been talking about chips for such a long time. Yeah. Do you realize that the SOX is up 250% from the low that it hit in March? I mean, unbelievable, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's only natural that we're going to get a bit of a pullback. But, you're talking to the wrong guy, Carol and Tim, because I'm always bullish on technology, right?
Listen, as Kathy Wood said to us yesterday from Mark, right? Things don't go up in a straight line. Dan Morgan, thank you so much. Senior Portfolio Manager over at Synovus Trust. Joining us once again on the phone from Atlanta. Stick around, everyone. We've got the closing bell in just about 3.5 minutes' time. This is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. There you have it. Sound of the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange. Folks from B of A Acquisition ringing that closing bell as we await the latest numbers out of NVIDIA. A record for the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Equities reversing losses, staging a rally as Fed Chair Jay Powell reaffirmed his view that the economy needs support. Government bond yields climbed along with oil prices. S&P 500 index at the close moving higher today. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all rallying. S&P up 44, a gain of 1.1%. The Dow ending the day close to session highs, up 424, up 1.4%. A 1% jump for NASDAQ, higher by 132 points. But again, a record for the Dow, 31,961, up 424 points. 10-year yield, 1.37%. Gold down $2.50. Spot gold now at $18.03 the ounce, lower by 0.1%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.6%, $63.28 for a barrel of West Texas Intermediate crude. Fed Chair Jay Powell again reaffirming his view that the economy needs support. David Leibovitz is global market strategist at J.P. Morgan Asset Management.
You're seeing assets begin to reprice, and, frankly, below 1% on the 10-year, where the 30-year has been trading. Those rates were reflecting a world where we were still in lockdown. And I think what you're seeing is that investors are finally beginning to wake up to the fact that 2021 is going to be a year where the global economy booms. We're getting more stimulus here in the United States. It sounds like policymakers around the world are going to remain accommodative over the course of the next 12 months.
GameStop shares up 104% before a trading halt as retail traders took to Reddit to discuss the outlook for the stock following news of the departure of Chief Financial Officer Jim Bell. Recapping, stocks rally, S&P 500 index moving higher.
Whoa, yeah, what I say.
Nobody move a muscle. Bloomberg Business Week. Movers and shakers.
Damn, Stiffy, you got some moves.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, time to take a little bit of a deeper dive into today's trade. Carol Master along with Tim Stenevec. We're waiting for NVIDIA earnings. We're going to talk about GameStop in just a moment because certainly on our radar, stock halted in trading because once again, a big jump. But let's just do a quick round of earnings. Viacom CBS is out. Fourth quarter adjusted EPS for continuing operations, $1.04. That's 2 pennies better than what Wall Street was forecasting. Fourth quarter revenue, pretty much in line, $6.87 billion versus an estimate of $6.86 billion. Adjusted revenue, $3.15 billion. So that's above the $3 billion that was forecasted by analysts. Quick check on what the stock is doing in the after hours.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at Booking Holdings right now.
I'm just going to say Viacom right now. Looks like it's unchanged. What do you got for Booking?
Booking Holdings earnings out just now, too. Fourth quarter revenue, $1.2 billion versus estimates of $1.2 billion. So directly in line with expectations right there. The company reporting fourth quarter revenue, $1.2 billion versus estimates of $1.2 billion. Looking at adjusted loss per share of 57 cents versus estimates of $4.04. Fourth quarter adjusted EBITDA loss of $38 million versus estimated loss of $41.7 million. So a beat on the adjusted EBITDA loss.
Not seeing the stock move here in the after hours. It's up about 10% so far this year. And just finally, NetApp also out. Fourth quarter adjusted EPS, $1.06 to $1.14. That's the outlook, and that compares with $1.09. Also, when it comes to the fourth quarter outlook for net revenue, $1.44 billion to $1.54 billion. The estimate is for $1.47. The third quarter, they beat by 9 cents for third quarter adjusted EPS, and revenue $1.47 billion versus $1.43 billion. And just taking a quick look at that stock, and it is down about 2.4%. Let's talk GameStop.
Yeah, let's talk GameStop. And to help us do that is Bloomberg Cross Asset reporter Sarah Ponczak. She joins us right now from Bloomberg headquarters right here in New York City. Hey, Sarah, what is going on with GameStop? Toward the end of the day today, a little after 3 o'clock, we saw what do we call this? I mean, explosive growth, finishing the day at more than 100% higher.
The Reddit trade's back. Let's put it that way.
I regret to inform you.
Yeah. I mean, it's fun, right? So the last hour of trading or so Some are pointing to the upcoming departure of CFO Jim Bell. This was reported, and there were some stories about this yesterday, though. So it's not like this is new news. Some are saying, though, that those on Reddit have begun to discuss GameStop after this bit of the reorganization. But it's not just GameStop. Yes, GameStop gets the headlines. You had GameStop close today up more than 100%. So we saw a more than doubling of share prices, GameStop closing at $91.71 a share. But if you go down the list of those companies that were halted by Robinhood back on January 29th, that list of 50 companies, we saw many of them take off around the same time. So Koss, the headphone maker, for example, closed up 55%. Express, the retail brand, closed up 41%. Naked brand closed up 30%. And we really did see this take off all around the same time of day. So yes, GameStop surged the most, and it certainly grabs the most attention. But it was really across the board for many of those Reddit favorites.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, though, if it continues into tomorrow, what that might potentially mean for the trade.
Oh, it certainly does. It makes you wonder if we're all of a sudden going to see the same type of volatility that we saw back at the end of January. Granted, though, much has changed since then. One, there's more awareness of Wall Street bets and the Reddit community and everything that surrounds that. Also there is that we have seen short positions in many of these stocks, especially GameStop, come down. So you don't have the same amount of short positions built into the system to see that type of a squeeze. Still, though, at the same time, I can say once this started happening, you know, I went on Wall Street Bets, started looking at the Discord, and
that's what I was
there's
wondering.
Plenty of action, there's plenty of communication, and it feels like we're back in the good old days.
Hey, here's something that's interesting. Michael Regan, senior markets editor at Business, just tweeting this right now. He's saying that the ramp up in GameStop is literally being driven by people buying one share at a time. It's remarkable. What do you make of that?
Well, it's amazing. And when you think about those who are buying GameStop, and it'll also be interesting to look at the options data. I haven't had a chance to do so yet. But when you think about the retail trader trying to get in here, they're not buying 100 shares, 200 shares, 500 shares of GameStop at a time. They're smaller trades, and they can move in masses. I mean, you look at Wall Street Bets now, and there's 9.2 million members. There are many more people who know about Wall Street Bets nowadays than they did at the start of 2021, and who are paying attention to what goes on with these stocks, for example. I will say, though, AMC, granted, there is some more fundamental news surrounding the gains that we've seen in AMC lately, but AMC also up 18% today. And if you look at all options traded in the U.S., an AMC call expiring on Friday, actually, was the second most actively traded option.
Okay, that says a lot. Hey, good stuff. Thank you so much for all that analysis. Bloomberg News cross-asset reporter Sarah Ponzik. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Dave, you're up.
Hi, my name is Dave.
Wilson, where are you? Wilson!
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
We're going for a price on Wilson.
Open up the door, it's Dave. Who? Dave.
Hey, Mr. Wilson!
Hey, Dave. What's the stock of the day today?
That would be Itron, Tim. It's a maker of automated utility meter readers along with related software and services. The company was founded in 1977 and went public in 1993. The ticker is ITRI. Itron shares have been on the rise lately. Over the past 2 calendar years, they more than doubled. Last month, they broke a record that had stood since April 2008, and today they passed January's record. The latest advance was spurred by Itron's fourth quarter results. Earnings were more than twice the average analyst estimate in the Bloomberg survey for the second straight quarter, even though revenue this time around was lower than projections. Itron also reinstated annual forecasts, which were suspended in May because of the coronavirus pandemic. The company's view for this year echoed last quarter's results as its earnings forecast beat estimates and its sales projection came up a bit short. Even so, Itron shares not only set a record, but also had their biggest gain since March. They rose 18.5%.
I thought you were going to say GameStop, and that's why it's up more than 100% right now.
No.
That's a no.
That's a no.
You just got through talking about it.
I know.
I know. Or layered. We like layered conversations. All right. Itron, by the way, up 20% this year. Dave Wilson, have a great evening. And speaking of having a great evening, have a good evening.
Thank you.
We'll see you tomorrow. We're going to feature up another interview you did earlier.
I'm excited.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. You can listen to it on your way home.
Oh, yeah, I am. Ambassador Bolton.
Have a good one.
Thanks.
Safe one. All right, let's get back to world and national news. Nancy Lyons, where shall we begin?
Well, Carol, it is safe and effective. That's the headline from the FDA staff report on Johnson & Johnson's coronavirus vaccine. The analysis confirms J&J's finding that it is 72% effective in the U.S. trials. Dr. Paul Offit is on the FDA's advisory board and says this new vaccine has some real advantages.
It is refrigerator stable. It can be shipped and stored at refrigerator temperatures. It can once it gets to the final place where it's going to be administered, it's stable in the refrigerator for 3 months. It's given as a single shot.
An independent advisory panel will be meeting on Friday to make its recommendation. If this vaccine is approved, the first doses are expected to make it into arms by early next month. With the addition of the J&J vaccine, there are now 3 options for Americans. President Biden is signing an executive order to improve the management of supply chains for crucial industries in order to avoid the sudden shortages that we saw from the pandemic. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports from Washington.
The administration will focus on computer chips, large-capacity batteries for electric cars, pharmaceuticals, and strategic minerals, Peter Harrell of the National Security Council said.
We'll be using a mix of incentives to encourage production here, looking at ways to ensure there's surge capacity, stockpiling, working with our allies and partners to make sure that we have cross-border open flows, and a range of different tools here.
A bipartisan group in Congress is urging the president to use the Defense Production Act to address shortages of computer chips, which already impacted the auto industry. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. Carol Massar here in our Interactive Brokers studio. Charlie Pellet joining me once again. I just have to mention, because we talked about GameStop jumping in the regular session and it was halted in trading, that after Charlie closing up almost 104%, it's now up another 22% after hours.
It is absolutely amazing the run that stock has had, and all of that because of word last night at roughly this time about the impending departure of the chief financial officer.
Right, but you do wonder, deja vu, like we've seen this movie a little bit before. AMC is up about 2.5% here in the after hours, so we're going to be going through and just kind of tracking here at Bloomberg all of those meme stocks and see what happens. In the meantime, you put A-Rod and SPAC in a headline. I'm going to read it.
Yeah, I would suggest that too. And, I'm just thinking just a couple of years ago, if I had tossed that out, let's talk about Alex Rodriguez, let's talk about the Yankees, and let's talk about SPACs, you would have been, what the heck are you talking about, Charlie, here? But after losing a deal for the Mets to billionaire Steve Cohen, A-Rod has another game that he wants to win, and he has joined the lengthening roster of financiers, executives, politicians, celebrities, and athletes who have signed on to special purpose acquisition companies or those SPACs. His Slam Corp began trading Tuesday, and it's now scouting for a merger deal to make him and his investors richer.
Yeah, pretty wild, right? So we know, and I'm just looking at it, it looks like a little bit lower maybe in today's session, but this is what it's all about. All this, we've seen celebrities, we've seen really smart, well-known investment professionals certainly getting into the SPAC craze. We have seen in the last year or so just SPACs take off specifically. And it looks like, I don't know, I guess he's going to be looking for, I don't know what they're going to be looking for specifically. Is it sports related?
It's all sorts of things. And
Yeah.
if you've been listening to Bloomberg, you hear us talk about SPACs a lot. Yes, we do. According to our data, 164 blank check companies have raised more than $50 billion in IPOs this year.
Yeah, it's just been on a boom, and certainly so much more than the 12 months prior. Thanks, Charlie.
stocks, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We are awaiting the latest numbers out of NVIDIA. Move higher today for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. Record for the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Equities reverse losses, staged a rally as Fed Chair Jay Powell reaffirmed his view that the economy needs support. Government bond yields climbed along with oil prices. Energy and industrial companies led gains today in the S&P 500 index, offsetting weakness for tech shares. Banks advanced, sending an industry gauge to its highest since 2007. Small cap shares rallied more than 2% after regulators said Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine is safe and effective. Today, we saw Johnson & Johnson up by 1.34% among some of the other vaccine names. Pfizer shares down 0.5%, 33.75. BioNTech up by 2%. AstraZeneca advanced by 1.6%, and Moderna shares tumbled today by 3.6%. I mentioned some of the bank names today. We did see a move higher for Bank of America, up 2.4%. Citigroup was up 2.8%. Wells Fargo rallied 3.1%. JP Morgan Chase up today by 1.8%. So an update for the U.S. equity markets today, a retreat for gold. Spot gold lower by 0.1%, 18.03 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.9%, 63.44 a barrel. And the 10-year yield 1.37%, down 10.30 seconds. Again, recapping, stocks did move higher. Record for the Dow up 424 points, up 1.4%. S&P up 1.1%. NASDAQ up by 1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Appreciate that update. A story that caught my attention, Republican Mitt Romney saying that Donald Trump likely would win the GOP presidential nomination if he decided to run again in 2024. This is reported out by our Laura Davison. And you know, keep in mind what's going on is we've got two wings of the GOP, traditionalists like Mitt Romney, and then you've got Trump loyalists, and they're really both struggling over where the GOP goes. I'll talk a little bit more about this on the other side, but I do want to mention that President Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, he caught up with my co-host, Quick Takes Tim Stenovec, earlier today, and in a little clip from the interview, Bolton shares his thoughts on exactly where he thinks the Republican Party is headed. Check it out.
Ambassador, I want to get your take on the Republican Party and the future of the Republican Party. Senator Mitt Romney of Utah says that if President Trump runs again, he'll win the nomination in 2024. What do you make of that? Do you agree? And what does that mean about the state of the GOP right now in this post-Trump world? Is it a post-Trump world for the GOP?
Well, I'm certainly doing everything I can to make it a post-Trump world, and I don't like to disagree with Senator Romney, but I don't think Trump is going to run in 2024. I think he will talk about it incessantly until then to help keep himself in the center of attention. But I think he knows he lost this election in 2020. He won't admit it, of course, because he's developed his they stole the election narrative. But he's very worried that if he runs in 2024, he won't be able to go with that made-up excuse another time. And, you know, being a loser is the worst thing in the world for Donald Trump, so I don't think he's going to run. I think he's caused enormous damage to the party. I think, though, I'm optimistic that we can fix it.
Ambassador Bolton, there are many, many members of the GOP in the House and the Senate who continue to refuse to acknowledge that the 2020 election was a free and fair election. The idea that it was stolen from the American people. What's the message that you have for them?
Well, I think there's a lot of work to be done because it's bad for the country. It's certainly not good for the Republican Party to have people who won't accept that reality. I think the truth is that the Democrats outsmarted the Trump campaign and the Republican Party. I think they pushed the envelope in a lot of ways. But, you know, if what they were doing was so palpably illegal, where was the Trump campaign in August and September and October? Why weren't they in court? Why weren't they protesting the steps in states like Wisconsin and Arizona and Pennsylvania then? Why did they wait till after the election? You know, because Trump was out there discouraging Republicans from casting mail-in ballots. He did this to himself. Either that or the Trump campaign's lawyers were the worst legal team since memory runneth not back to the contrary. The fact is that Trump lost this election on his own. He didn't need to have it stolen from him. He lost it fair and square.
Last question. Who should the Republican Party look to for leadership right now?
Well, I don't think we need to look at one particular person. I do think this is a period of let 100 flowers bloom. I think that's good for the party. We as Republicans and conservatives believe in competition economically. We should believe in it politically as well. So I'd like to hear from the perhaps dozen or more people who might want to run in 2024. Let's hear what they have to say on philosophy and policy, not what we think about Donald Trump. That's in the rearview mirror as far as I'm concerned.
And that was John Bolton, former National Security Advisor under President Trump, also former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, talking with my co-host, Tim Stanovic of Bloomberg Quick Take. Check out more from Quick Take at bloomberg.com/Quick Take. And Tim and I both mentioned a story that's out on the Bloomberg about Mitt Romney saying that if former President Trump would win the GOP presidential nomination, if he decided to run again in 2024, he just talks about Mitt Romney, a quote, "He has by far the largest voice and a big impact on his party." He's talking about the GOP. There is a poll out there, a recent one that said that 46% would abandon the GOP and join a Trump-led party if he were to create one, according to a USA Today Suffolk poll that was conducted last week. So this is something we've certainly talked about a lot, and I know Kevin Cirilli has too on Sound On Bloomberg Radio about the division that we're seeing in the GOP at this time. So something to certainly keep on our radar. Also on my radar right now, NVIDIA crossing the Bloomberg terminal with its latest earnings. Fourth quarter adjusted EPS $3.10 versus an estimate of $2.81. So that's a beat of about 19 cents there. Fourth quarter revenue of $5 billion versus an estimate of $4.82 billion. Fourth quarter adjusted gross margin 65.5%. That was smack in line with what Wall Street was forecasting. And looking forward, first quarter revenue, they're looking at $5.3 billion plus or minus 2%. The estimate out there is $4.5 billion. And I know Dan Morgan over at Synovus talked about the data center revenue, something he would be watching and looking at the different metrics. Fourth quarter data revenue was $1.9 billion versus an estimate of $1.88 billion. Quick check on what the stock is doing in the after hours, and it's certainly going to be one of the names we'll watch in the Thursday trade. Shares of NVIDIA up 1.4% here in the after hours. The stock is up about 11% so far in 2021. You're listening to Bloomberg.
broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960 to the country, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Yeah, it's Bloomberg Business Week on this Wednesday. Carol Masser in our Interactive Brokers studio. Coming up is someone I've talked to here at Bloomberg before, and she created IT Cosmetics, then sold it to L'Oreal. She's got a great story, but she's also got a great book out that is telling her story in hopes that it'll help some others that are out there, women specifically. So Jamie Kern-Lima is going to be with us in just a moment. Let's get back to your top business stories, some of the earnings after the close. Here is once again Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much. NVIDIA forecast revenue for the first quarter that beat the average analyst estimate. NVIDIA shares after hours up right now by 2.5%. It was an up day on Wall Street today with the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all rallying right to the numbers, with the S&P up 44 to 39.25, up 1.1%. The Dow record close 31,961, up 424 points, up by about 1.4%. 10-year yield creeping up to 1.40% before pulling back 1.38% right now. 10-year down 13.30 seconds. Gold down 2.56, $2.56, down 0.1%. Spot gold at $18.03 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude today up 2.9%, 63.43 for a barrel of WTI. MicroStrategy, the enterprise software firm that has embraced Bitcoin investing, said it paid an average $52,765 for nearly 20,000 tokens last week after issuing $1.05 billion in convertible bonds. MicroStrategy surging today by just about 18%. Foxconn Technology Group says it will develop an electric vehicle with Fisker, part of the manufacturer's efforts to boost its automotive capabilities at a time when technology companies, including its main customer Apple, are looking to expand in vehicles. Recapping, S&P up 44, up 1.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, really appreciate it. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. And just interesting headline just crossing right now. Moderna working to potentially deliver up to 1 billion doses in fiscal year 2021. So we continue to see headlines, and especially from those folks and companies that are involved in the COVID-19 vaccine, continuing to hear updates about manufacturing and really getting it out. As we talked earlier, there's a story in the magazine about AstraZeneca and their work and some of the problems that they've had. They're hoping for a new data set to kind of help in terms of getting more acceptance of their vaccine. So definitely check that out, that story. It's at Bloomberg.com. So our next guest created a cosmetics company after a lot of hard work and staying true to her brand. It took off. She sold it to L'Oreal, became the first female CEO of a L'Oreal brand in the company's long history. She'd be the first to tell you it was a journey and often not easy. She's written about it in a new book, Believe It, How to Go from Underestimated to Unstoppable. So great to be talking once again with Jamie Kern-Lima. She's on the phone in Palm Beach, Florida. Jamie, so great to have you here with us. How are you? And tell me about your past year. It sounds like it's been an interesting one and a busy one.
Oh, Carol, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's been a journey, first ever book. And I just, after hearing from so many entrepreneurs and so many people out there that would send me messages on Instagram and say, oh, wow, congrats on going from Denny's waitress to selling your company for over $1 billion. Like, did you just get lucky, or, did you have connections? And they would share with me how they're, struggling and having not having traction in their own businesses. And it kind of made me realize that when you just see the highlight reel that's out there everywhere, people feel alone in their own seasons of rejection and setbacks. And so I just decided to literally share, like first time ever, share all the stories behind the stories of the real stuff that happened, and kind of like starting my business from my living room and going through 3 years of hearing no from just about everyone.
It's hard.
And how to turn those no's into yeses, and how to believe in yourself when no one else is believing in you, and how I turned that into a company with over 1,000 employees and then went through the acquisition process and everything else. But it's really all the stuff people typically never share. I just decided, let me share it all because I don't know. I think we all are stronger together when we do that.
Well, can I just say it's so you because you're very upfront about everything, and I feel like we often talk about stocks, and we've been talking about a lot about some of the trades that just seem to just go up and up and up. Nothing's ever up in a straight line, right? There's a lot of things that we have to get through. There's down periods, but just like you, when you went on QVC to show how your makeup line worked. You took off your own makeup to show, and you bared yourself before it was really in vogue for people to maybe do something like that. And I feel like you're very kind of out front and center. Tell me about that and how you want to kind of send that as a message to people.
Yeah, I think the power of authenticity and of hearing our own gut and trusting it is huge. I think whether we're talking about stocks or talking about if we're supposed to go after our own dream or let go of a dream, I think too many people start to second guess their own gut and sometimes their own common sense, and they start to get distracted by what's hot right now and what's everyone else doing. And I, it's funny growing at cosmetics. I was trying to do something really different because it made sense in my gut, right? I think for so many years in my industry, in the industry I was in, it had always been done a certain way. Makeup companies had always sold beauty products using super, flawless images of, in a way, unattainable beauty. And I just, in my gut, I was like, and this was before anyone was doing this, but I'm like, how are women supposed to know or men supposed to know a product's going to work for them,
right?
If they don't see someone who looks like them using it, right? And here's the thing, Carol, and this is what I'd say to any entrepreneur, anyone looking at is this business or that business or this stock or that stock a good investment, is take it back to the fundamentals of gut instinct in the sense of, I for 3 years was told by every retailer, no one will buy makeup from someone who looks like you or who's going to use models the way you are, planning to do it. And it was 3 years of rejection. And, we got done to under $1,000 in our bank account. And sometimes in life when that happens to us,
right,
we're tempted to go, let me change what I'm doing because it's not working. But every time I kept checking with my gut, I'm like, no, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I made the decision to trust my gut. And, fast forward a decade, we are now the largest beauty brand in the country.
It's Jamie, hang on for a second because I have to do a little bit of news, but I want to talk a little bit more about that and more of what's in your book because you really do lay it out so well, and it's a great read. We're talking with Jamie Kern-Lima, and she got a new book out. She created it Cosmetics. The book is called Believe It, How to Go From Underestimated to Unstoppable, and we'll continue the conversation in just a moment. We do need to do some world and national news. For that, over to Washington, D.C. and Nancy Lyons. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol, another vaccine is close to being approved for emergency use. The FDA says Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 single-dose shot is 72% effective. It still needs approval, though, by an FDA panel, which meets on Friday. But White House Coronavirus Response Coordinator Jeff Zients says it's another positive development.
Obviously, the prospect of a potential third approved vaccine is very encouraging and will help to increase the overall vaccine supply, which will allow more Americans to get access to getting vaccinated sooner.
J&J has said it will initially be able to provide 4 million doses, but will ramp up production to meet its promise of 100 million doses by the end of June. President Biden will soon have his first call to Saudi Arabia's King Salman. That's the word from White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. The call is expected to come ahead of the release of a U.S. intelligence report that may lay blame for the murder of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi on the king's son and heir to the throne, Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Psaki was asked about possible sanctions today.
He will not hold back, and he will speak out when there are concerns he has about human rights abuses, about the lack of freedom of speech or the lack of freedom of media and expression, or any concerns he has.
Singer Bruce Springsteen will pay a $500 fine and has admitted to consuming alcohol in a restricted area. But he was cleared today of other charges in connection with a DUI arrest back in November. His blood alcohol content was found to be well below the legal limit. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. Helps if I push the button. Carol Masser in our Interactive Brokers studio. You know, at the end of the day, Charlie Pellet, like things just aren't firing, the synapses. What is firing, though, and this is one of the most read stories on the Bloomberg, so Bloomberg terminal users are reading this, has to do with Charlie Munger, the longtime business partner of Warren Buffett. They have been a pair for a long, long time. Well, he said Robinhood Markets and other brokerages that attract inexperienced retail investors are essentially offering, quote, gambling services and have found a, quote, dirty way to make money. And he made these comments at the annual meeting of Daily Journal Corporation, where he is chairman.
Interesting day on Wall Street. Interesting comments from Munger. And what a day, though, in terms of those so-called left-for-dead stocks that really rallied a lot of the big familiar names that we saw surge last month. And if you recall, last month, there was all the focus of what was happening with Wall Street, regulators, and eventually Congress, as members of Reddit's Wall Street Bets Forum egged on retail hordes. And all of a sudden, we saw an awful lot of buying today. And that is what led to those comments from Charlie Munger.
Well, listen, you go to people like him, right? Because you want to know someone who has seen a lot of new investment vehicles come into the world, seen a lot of investment cycles. And so it's interesting to get his trend because he weighed in on that. He also talked about the growth in SPACs, those special purpose acquisition companies. He called that a sign of a, quote, irritating bubble, and he warned that this must end badly, but he's not sure when.
Exactly. Munger, by the way, just want to point out, Munger is 97 years old, right? And he's railing against commission-free trading, calling it one of the world's most, quote, disgusting lies being perpetuated by the investing world. Munger says Robinhood trades are not free. He says when you pay for order flow, quote, you're probably charging your customers more and pretending to be free. He says it is very dishonorable.
Well, it's interesting. This is a big debate of our time. And as we said, one of our big stories this year, GameStop, by the way, big rally in the regular session. It's up, Charlie, another 62% in the after hours. All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. This is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. After the bell, NVIDIA forecast revenue for the first quarter that beat the average analyst estimate. NVIDIA shares up by 2.5%. Also reporting after the bell, Viacom CBS. It said its two main streaming services, the newly christened Paramount Plus and Showtime, grew to almost 30 million subscribers, up by more than half in the past year. Ad sales up 4%, reversing recent declines. Viacom CBS shares after hours, they're down now by just about 0.3%. It was an up day on Wall Street. In fact, a record for the Dow. Equities reverse losses, staged a rally as Fed Chair Jay Powell reaffirmed his view that the economy needs support. Today, the S&P 500 index climbed 44 points, up 1.1%. The Dow rallied 424, up 1.35%. Nasdaq up 132, up by 1%. 10-year yield 1.36%. Gold down $1.50 the ounce now to $18.04. Down by 0.1%. West Texas Intermediate crude now at $63.45 a barrel, up today by 2.9%, just about a one-year high for WTI. Recapping, Dow at a record, S&P up 44, up 1.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, appreciate that update, Charlie. And just want to mention that at this hour, President Biden is signing an executive order, and he is holding a ceremony at the White House. Just made some comments talking about how he and the Vice President, Kamala Harris, had a productive meeting with lawmakers, saying it was, quote, the best meeting that they've had in 5 weeks. He says Americans should never face shortages of goods and services, and that he's directing officials to also, on another matter, address the semiconductor shortfall. It's something that we just talked about earlier with Dan Morgan over at Synovus. He says semiconductor issue, though, will not be solved immediately. Says we need to stop playing catch up. But again, ending saying that he is grateful for lawmakers who met with him today, and right now signing an executive order on that U.S. supply chain review. So any other headlines that come out of it, we will bring it to you. I do want to get back to Jamie Kern-Lima. She is the creator of It Cosmetics. It was a company she created, sold it to L'Oreal for $1.2 billion. She became the first female CEO of L'Oreal's brand, or a L'Oreal brand, I should say, in their long history. Her new book, Believe It, How to Go From Underestimated to Unstoppable, and she's still with us on the phone from West Palm Beach, Florida. Jamie, what did you learn about this process, writing a book? From someone who created a company, probably learned a lot along the way. What did kind of writing it down, going through it again, what did that teach you?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is, how I built a billion-dollar company was always remembering it's not about me, remembering it's about doing something bigger than myself. And I had to remember that in writing this book because it is scary. It is scary and vulnerable and all those things, to share all of the things I did wrong building this business and then all of the things I did right. But also just the real vulnerability that I think we all face as entrepreneurs or as people in business where, sometimes we don't listen to our gut and we regret it. Sometimes we are tempted, to have everything we believe in on the line, have other people telling us what to do, and how do we decide what to do? Like it's the first time ever, Carol, where I would say probably 95% of the stories in the book, and I wrote every single word of it myself, all 80,000 words.
Love it.
Our stories I've never shared before, but I had to make it bigger than myself. I think at the end of the day, that's how we all know that what we're doing in this world and our time on this earth matters. And, this is packed with the things I wish I had known that would have saved me so much money, so much time crying myself to sleep at night, and the things I did right in terms of, handling so many rejections and so many people telling me my idea wasn't going to work. And then there's a lot of, I think, universal lessons for everyone in business on, I talk about.
Well, wait. Hang on a second. What's one thing that you wish you had known when you started the process of creating your company, or what's one really big lesson that you learned? Because we talked to a lot of entrepreneurs about the things that they learned, and I'm just curious what stood out for you that was a game changer, if you had maybe known it earlier.
Yeah, I think that knowing, I mean, there's so many in the book. Champions aren't made when the game is easy. And that would have helped me process a lot of the hard times sooner. One of the big ones is I believe your gut is more powerful than anyone else's advice. And when I look back, let me just say this one. This one is big. I believe that when you are doing something new or novel, you shouldn't, or authentic. If you're doing something authentic to you, even if it's been done before, if you're doing something authentic to you, by definition, it's novel. It's never been done before. When you're doing something new or novel, don't be surprised when even experts or even visionaries don't think it's going to work and don't believe in it, because at the end of the day, a lot of people can't see something happening if they don't have that social proof in their mind that tells them subconsciously it's going to work because it's never been done before. And had I realized that sooner, I would have saved myself a lot of nights crying myself to sleep. Like what I've learned, Carol, is that in business, as entrepreneurs, as creators, as ideators, we have to get really good at cheering for ourselves, because most people cheer for you after you've made it.
Right. It's so easy, right? Yeah.
Because
it's like this club thing after you've made it. It's almost like high school all over again and like popularity. Hey, one thing I want to go through, because we only have a couple of minutes left here, a couple of things I just want to quickly go through. The way you wove through the story of how you watched Oprah when you were younger, you wanted to be a talk show host, and ultimately you get a chance to meet her, and you walk us through that story. It's one of those like pinch me moments.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being a 9-year-old little girl. I would watch her in my living room, and I don't know if you remember this moment, Carol, but she said, it was in a Barbara Walters interview, and she said, I always knew I was destined for greatness. And I remember she took a lot of flack for it in the press. But I remember being a 9-year-old little girl hearing that and feeling like, me too. Like I had that feeling, And I think a lot of us have that feeling, like we have something to give the world or serve or create. I always had that feeling. And so she's always kind of been my mentor from afar my whole life. And I, crazy story, wild story. I share the whole thing in the book, how it
Just give us like a 25-second, and I want everybody to go read it in its entirety, but just give us a 25-second quickly thing.
Well, I met her, and it was the craziest day, and I share how I met her. I then got a phone call inviting me to lunch at her house. It was just she and I spent 3 hours with her, and she was the very first person to read this book. And I wanted her blessing on the stories I share in the book, because I share a lot. And I really would never do that without her blessing. But I share how. I believe in the power of prayer. I believe in the power of believing in ourselves.
Right.
I believe in manifesting. And I also talk a lot about, really, Carol, at the heart and soul, this book is for every woman and every man who struggles with self-doubt and who wants to learn how to go from not believing in themselves